lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. When you're racing, it's life. Anything that happens before or after, it's just waiting.
Matt Williams got a brilliant start from the third row of the grid.
He's gone, he's hit him, he's straight off at the chase.
And a half-second lead. Oh, with the sizzling car in the background.
He has it. Oh, he's round on the last lap.
There's a massive accident.
Next to the inside, what a move, what a move.
Good evening and welcome everybody. It's been a little while since we did one of these, but we're back for more AMS Oz Super 2 action, this time from North Queensland. Townsville Street Circuit is the place, and round 8 is the game that everybody's playing tonight. So we're past the halfway point in the season, or we're getting right into that sort of mid part of the season where everybody's found their feet, everybody's trying to get their first race win up or continue their race winning streak, and all these little battles within battles have started to emerge over the course of the last couple of rounds and set to continue with a feature race tonight around Townsville. So away we will go in approximately, let's call it 20 odd minutes time. But between now and then, plenty of information to cover. As per usual, my name is Steve De Vries, aka Nether, and it's a pleasure to be joined again by Hans Brunswick. How are you, Hans?
Hello, Stephen. I'm well. Glad to see you're well as well. And, we're back and ready for some more action. We saw an amazing action on the weekend in the Supercars round, so hopefully we can repeat that tonight. Also another feature round, so it's going to be very interesting if some of our runners, if they don't make it, well, then they end up on a big fat zero, so they don't quite have another qualifying session, another race to make up for it. But the Townsville Street Circuit certainly turns it on. A lot of bumps, a lot of like street circuit characteristics, concrete walls everywhere, and danger. Fraught with danger everywhere as well.
Yeah, you're certainly right. We'll have a look at the track map in just a few moments just to show exactly what it looks like and all those sorts of issues that come with a street circuit. For the moment, we're going to have a quick look at the driver points situation. Now, this was only updated recently this week. There were a couple of penalties handed out by the driving standards observers and the review panel, but this is where it stands right now. So Phil Boak still at the top of the pile, 2 wins and 1,668 points. Foley started to come on strong. 2 wins at Hidden Valley have really helped his cause enormously, getting onto the back of his PBF Race Engineering teammate there, 1-2. Will Devonish doing really, really well despite no race wins, is still in solid position, but just ahead of Mitchell Hathaway. Have a look at some of these battles in the mid-pack here. Cam Rutledge, Ricky Slick, very, very close. Steve Buerger and Termo actually tied on points, but there's a tiebreaker in play there. There's, believe it or not, they both have a 4th place as their best result once, but Steve Buerger's got more 8th place finishes than Termo does. That's their next best results, would you believe? So that's the tiebreaker in that little situation there. JP Courier, well, he had his momentum sort of arrested a little bit at Hidden Valley. He had 3 race wins on the trot up till that point. He was involved in a few incidents, which we'll show you in a very short period of time. And Billy Dougal-Salonga and Dwayne Davies bringing up the back end of the top 12. So it's starting to become a little bit of a congested top 12 here, Hans. There's plenty of people that are starting to make their move, mainly Brenton Foley, as he tries to hone in on the back of his teammate here.
Yeah, also to note that Phil Boak didn't exactly have a good run at Hidden Valley either. So not only that, JP Courier, disastrous run, like you said, involved in a couple of incidents, which we'll look at. But Will Devonish, he's still hanging tough in there. He's quite the consistent driver, and I always say how good he is and how he keeps out of trouble, which is fantastic to see. He's trying to cement that sort of 3rd position, but he's very closely followed by Mitch Hathaway in the first of the HDS racing cars. Also of note is that we're seeing... Sorry, never mind. We're just sort of seeing Brendan Ross. He got off to a fairly good start. He was very consistent in the first part of the season and got a win. But lately, it's been a very rough trot for Brendan Ross and FCR Motorsport in general. I think they've not had an ideal run thus far in the sort of midpoint of the season.
No, you're absolutely right. Then Brendan Ross, another one of the parties in some of the incidents that were under review from Hidden Valley, which we will take a look at very, very shortly. But between now and then, we're going to have a look at the race information for tonight. So here it is, Townsville Street Circuit. First time in AMS Oz that we've actually raced this circuit. So going to be a very big learning experience for a lot of drivers tonight. 2.86 kilometres, a 62 lap feature race, so just over the 175 kilometres in distance, 177.32 to be precise. 3 left, 10 right hand corners, would you believe? There's a lot of right hand turns here. And we get down into, have a look at the good things. So the circuits can be wide enough to pass the front straight all the way through the kink turn at turn 1 down to turn 2. Plenty of room to pass. But as you said, Hans, the biggest problems with a street circuit: bumps, curbs, corners, hard stops, and on top of that, it is an extremely tricky circuit to master. This one, the corners come quick, the corners come fast, and they are by no easy task. There's plenty of learning, plenty of different lines for different corners, different attacking styles for different corners. You've got to watch the curbs. You're going to roll the car up on 2 wheels quite a lot. You've got to get the balance right. You've got to make sure you don't take too much curb. I'm running out of breath trying to get everything out here, but it is a very, very difficult and challenging circuit, and probably the most difficult turn of the lot is the last turn, turn 13, onto the main straight.
Yeah, that sort of turn 11 to 13 complex is quite interesting because someone will try and make a brave move. They get a good run through 10, and they'll make a brave move into turn 11. But turn 12, 13, you can, if you hang tough on the outside there, you'll be on the inside for turn 13. But that will sort of, I mean, you need to get good drive off that corner, and that will make your run onto the main straight. Then you've got the curve straight after the start finish line. Turn 1, it's a relatively simple looking right hand kink, but at 250 kilometers now, it's very brave, and we saw that in the supercars race, and we see it every year at Townsville. Then turn 2, another really good passing opportunity. Then turn 3, you sort of can make a pass, but there's a bit of diminishing returns on the exit of that corner. There's a wall that approaches you quite quickly. Turn 4, 5, and 6, you're basically trying to stay single file through there. Then turn 7, you can make a good pass down in there, and a decisive one. 8, 9, 10, you're spending a lot of time turning. And also of note, you mentioned that there is 3 left turns and 10 right turns. It's a very asymmetrical circuit in that sense. And since we spend a lot of the lap turning around here, the left rear tyre does get a punishing. So the tyre wear rate is normal, thankfully, but over 177k, it's going to be quite difficult to manage that tyre life as well.
Yeah, certainly will. There's a lot of tyre management that's going to take place here, especially being a 62 lap race, and as you said, that left-hand rear tyre copping and pounding. There's also not very much runoff in the first couple of corners as well. Turn 1, 2, 3. There's a little bit at turn 2, but if you carry too much speed, you're going to go in the fence. And same at turn 3. It's really when you start to get up through turns 5, 6, and 7, the first of the chicanes, that you really start to get some runoff. If you do make a little bit of a mistake, at least you can try and get out of it to such a degree that you're not going to compromise your race entirely. So a little bit of care factor needs to be brought into play here as well with all these drivers. And then speaking of care factor, well, while we are just waiting for the drivers to finish up their practice session, let's go and have a look at some of the incidents that were under review from Hidden Valley. So we'll take a look at the very first one of these. So this one here is a passing move that was made by Billy Dougal Salonga down into turn number 1. You can see just off to the right there, very, very difficult to spot, was Brendan Ross. And he was off the road there, and you can see him just rejoining in behind Glenn Miles. Now that took place under a yellow flag. So, and actually we've got the same replay twice, I'll just bring it up again. You can just see right about now, off in the distance, there he is. The yellow flag was out at the time that happened, and that attracted a 30-second penalty. So, passing under yellow flags, big no-no, 30-second penalty, and the standard has been set before from not Townsville, at Tasmania we had a similar incident. Here's another one of the incidents under review. So this is Steve Buerger. He'd been chasing JP Courier pretty hard for several laps. This was on lap number 7, and a little bit of an incident down here. There it is, straight into the back of JP Courier. Just got his braking all wrong for that turn 6 there at Darwin. His rejoin wasn't a problem. JP, on the other hand, just had to be a little bit careful here with the rejoin. Now the thing is, while there was a redress of position a bit later on down the track, it was unfortunately about a lap further on. Here it is from Steve Buerger's angle. And this, as you can see here, where the brake lights come on, Steve just carries a bit too much speed straight into the back of JP. That attracted a 15-second time penalty at the end of his race. And you can see there JP just having to negotiate the traffic again to get back on. And that wasn't the only incident JP was involved in. Actually, not long after that incident, this occurred. Now, this is an unreported incident, but you can see just trying to fit into a gap that wasn't there. There was another incident JP was involved in a few laps' time that you'll see in just a few moments, but this also probably led to a bit of the steering damage that he may have suffered as a result of that. And you can see here's his onboard. Gap always very quickly diminishing and wasn't exactly there. So because this incident was actually unreported, as we look from Cam Rutledge's view behind, this actually did not attract the view of the stewards for a penalty application. It was just noted as a possible contributing factor to some of the steering damage that may have occurred during this incident between JP Courier and Brendan Ross. This is down in the last series of complex, and it looks fairly inconspicuous there, with JP getting a little bit out of sorts and then having to recover the car, the pendulum effect, wallop straight into that same corner that he had contact with Turmo on, and a little bit of steering damage to boot. And then when we have a look at it from Brendan Ross's onboard, you can see here again, just a little tap, just a little touch too late on the brakes. And when you're following closely, you just need to be careful. And then he was the innocent victim, I guess, in a way. He'd actually backed out of it a little bit, just trying to let JP regain himself and get himself back on track. And then, unfortunately, was just clattered across the face. And that wasn't the end of it between those two, because this happened a couple of laps from home. Now, Brendan Ross got a 15-second penalty for the previous incident, but he had a run on JP out of the final turn here. And JP's moved to defend position, and the headlights came on in anger from Brendan Ross to say, hey, you haven't left me enough room. And from the other angles we've got of this, you can see he carried quite a bit of speed into that final corner. And the other angles of this incident seem to support that statement. You can see there it's very, very quickly diminishing, and then the headlights came on. But the most damning part of this one is the helicopter shot. So you can see here the run down the inside, and at this point right there it is, the frozen frame, not enough racing room, clearly not enough car length alongside. He's already been moved all the way over to the white line. The headlights have come on, and at that point in time Brennan's thought better of it and gotten out of it, and away we went again. So that incident was asked to be looked at predominantly for the issue with the improper use of headlights, but that has been deemed an incident that will not be investigated further. But it has served as a number of issues that are being raised in the driver's briefing, which is happening right now. Slight change in procedure and protocol for tonight. The last 5 minutes will be the briefing. So a number of drivers obviously have had some issues over the course of the season so far. The overall driving standard has actually been pretty good, Hans. But a couple of points to come out of those incidents were, you need to make sure you leave appropriate safe racing room for cars around you, which is perceived to be one full car width and a little bit of margin on each side. Drivers need to overtake with caution. They need to exercise some care. They need to take time to understand where best to make the passing opportunity before they actually commit to the move. And that obviously the headlights are only permissible for use when overtaking a lap car, so alerting the lap car to your presence, or in qualifying to signify that you're on a fast lap. And a couple of other items being looked at tonight, which we'll go through at the back end of qualifying, are very, very relevant with regards to this street circuit. But the other item that they need to make aware of to all the drivers, that if you want to raise a racing incident from the night, you need to alert the stewards within 24 hours. Otherwise, it becomes a bit long in the tooth to be looked at. But from what you've seen from those replays there, 30-second penalty for under yellow flags, 15-second penalty for turning the drivers around, and the headlight incident, sort of a no contest. You think it's fair? Your thoughts?
I'd say it's spot on. I mean, it's never easy to be a DSO, but I think in this situation, I definitely agree with the penalties, and I think they are fair enough. I think the main thing that was dead set out of order for me, what I thought was JP Courier moving Brendan Ross all the way to the white line and then some. I don't think that was necessarily permissible in a sense, and I'm glad the DSO agreed in that sense. We saw it in the live stream at Darwin, and unfortunately, he's attracted didn't attract a penalty actually, because the reason it was reported was not for that reason. It was for the headlights issue, and I think the improper use of headlights. I think it was best to let that go. It was best to no further action. Another thing to note. I feel bad for Steve Burko because yes, it was his fault, 15-second penalty, but I think he was in a very hard battle, and unfortunately, a bit of stress and anxiety sort of gets to us in this situation. Also, that Billy Douglas along, it was actually a rip of pass, and we were pretty impressed with the pass. But unfortunately, there was a car in the escape road and mowing the lawns out there. That was Brendan Ross out there, so he caused the yellow flag, and Billy Douglas along 30-second time penalty for that. So very important not to pass under safety car, replicating our real life rules. You shouldn't pass under safety car because you're not supposed to get an advantage. The race has been neutralised, and you should go 80% of race speed almost. But so we'll move on to tonight's proceedings, and very exciting things tonight we're going to look forward to, Stephen.
Certainly is. Well, qualifying is about to get underway, and the green light at the end of the pit lane has just been shown. First man onto the track is Brownie for the Cracker Racing team and his Penrite ZB Commodore. And as per usual, 4 laps on the board for the competitors, which usually means one out lap, 2 flying laps, and an in lap. So they've only got 15 minutes to set themselves a lap or 2, depending on how they're feeling. And we normally have about 17 to 18 guys in the server. At the moment, we've got 17. So a few may have elected just to duck out quickly and then come back in just at the end of practice, believe it or not. One of the men we were just talking about in those instances, JP Courier, was the man at the top of the time sheets in practice with a minute 10.2. So not a bad time at all. You just saw Brandy go through the chicane there at turns 7 and 8. And just to get a little bit of airtime under that left-hand set of wheels. So we're going to be very mindful of seeing how drivers attack some of these curbs, because we have seen some drivers take a few curbs already in the practice session, and in one case, you'll actually see an image a bit later on in the montage at the end of the stream, Termo with the wheels well and truly in the air. As Brandy commences his flying lap. So down Boundary Street he comes, through the kink at turn number 1, and hard on the anchors for the right-hander at turn 2, which takes him on to Charters Towers Road, and on the run up to turn 3, just a little bit of a left bend, not really a turn. Here's turn 3. Again, more right-hand turns. Now a little kick through 4, and then up to the first of the chicanes, a higher speed chicane, through turn 5, just understeers a little bit wide there. Puts it back on for the right hand turn 6. Scene of Jamie Wincup's accident the weekend just gone. Down to the second chicane, turn 7. Leaves a bit of room on the table at turn 7. Takes a bit of curve at turn 8, probably just the right amount. Runs it right out to the fence at turn 9. As you're saying, Hans here a bit earlier, it's constantly turning. Now through 10. Hard stop here for turn 11. Next to the right-handers. Slightly offline here. A little bit of a tardy lap. Now through turn 12 and up to the most difficult turn on the circuit, turn 13. Got to really try and late apex this as much as you can to get the maximum purchase on the exit curb for the run to the start-finish line. An opening salvo fired, 1:13.5. Immediately supplanted by Steve Burko.
Yeah, interesting to note that when we're seeing the attitude of the cars, there's a lot of turning and you have to straighten up the car before you start braking. Otherwise, you're putting a bit too much load on the tyres. So we're just looking at Steve Burko now, and now looking at Zach. And Zach has gone to the top of the time sheets with provisional pole 1 minute 11.317, and he's looking pretty good at the moment. Termo has just come into his first flying lap into second, about 0.7 of a second behind. That's in number 715 Castrol Racing Altima.
Cam Rutledge now jumps up into P5 with his first flying lap, also on circuit at the moment, looking at Glenn Miles, followed by Rhodey. So those guys a bit further down the order. So here they are. Glenn Miles, 21.21.4. Rhodey on an out lap at the moment, it appears. He didn't have a time registered against his name, so he's starting his first flying lap. As we come back to take a look at our current provisional pole sitter, up through the first sector, up through the second sector, pressing on Nice apex through turn number 11 and 12. Again, turning, always working those left-hand side tyres. And that's a very nice line through turn 13. Just a little bit slow on the exit though. Probably should still improve the time marginally. And he does by a quarter second.
So he's just on the cusp of getting into the 10s there. We saw JP setting the practice session at 1:10. So Zach 1 minute 11.082. Very close to the edge of a high 1 minute 10 lap. But the balance on the mother FGX Falcon actually looked a lot better than some of the other cars we saw, Steve. So I think Zach will be definitely one to watch. And he's sort of he's only entered the last round at Darwin, and he's sort of shown that he is no slouch. He can drive, and it would be good to see what he's got for us tonight.
Yeah, I believe that was his second outing at the round in Darwin, if memory serves me correctly. We looked down the list, and he actually had previously entered in the Barbagallo round as well, and then a fourth and a fifth place in Darwin. So, but definitely no slouch, but had to find his feet through that round at Barbagallo, and he's definitely a very, very solid and very, very capable driver out of the same stable as Steve Buerger, the FGX pair of racers for Top Gear Racing, as they like to call themselves. But looking down the order, I think we're about to get a change in the leader at the moment. At the top of the standings, Billy Dougal-Salonga looked very, very good through the first two sectors, although he's a little offline there at turn 11. Now the run to the final turn. A number of drivers just seem to slow up just a little bit when they get close to the exit, and able to carry as much speed, and actually faded badly in that third sector, did BDS. So still got another lap to go, but he was very, very good through sector 1. Sector 2 was actually purple, 16.3 through the middle sector, so he wasn't actually too bad at all, although he carried a bit too much speed there into turn 2. Very nearly ended up in the fence. Sector 1 split coming up now, and he's already behind.
Yeah, I think Sector 1 is a place that he's sort of struggling, but his Sector 2 was pretty impressive, so maybe the car performs a little bit better in Sector 2, not quite so much in Sector 3 as well, although it gets a bit of air there, runs it up all the way onto the AstroTurf, and he's using every little bit of road, but he's losing time, and a bit more air under there, he's almost 16 inches off the deck, but we'll see how his run looks into turn 11, and then hard on the brakes now. And slides a little bit and then transfers into understeer. And then we'll see. His line through turn 13 was actually really good, but it wasn't quite fast. So I'm quite surprised to see that, but it was very smooth. And he's smooth again, but I don't think he's quite getting onto the power early enough. That's why it's probably looking a bit smoother. And there we go, 111.87. So he's not beaten his previous best time. It's a 111.3 for Billy Dougal-Salonga. He's about 0.2 of a second behind Zach, and we're looking at Brenton Foley now, and this is his first flying lap, and he's up past the first sector just into turn 3, so he's 0.2 of a second up in the first sector on Zach. So if he keeps going, this is going to be definitely in the 10s here.
Look at the car attitude through 5 and 6. That was very, very good from Brenton Foley. Kept the average speed up through those corners very nicely, although he's wide at the apex there at 7 by a long, long way, and just snuck it in on the apex at turn 8, but he's lost some time. It's still up, but he lost at least a 10th and a half there, and he was looking very, very good. The car attitude very, very good through the turn 5 and 6 chicane, but just overcommitted a little bit through 7 and 8. He'll probably still be up, I'd imagine. He's definitely got the car pace. Have a link through 13. Gets it right down the apex, and that's a much, much better exit than anyone we've seen so far. Drive to the line, just fractionally short of getting into the 10s. He'll press on, the reigning champ. At the moment also joined out on outlaps on the circuit by Devonish and Brendan Ross and Gary Neville. But well clear of this man at the moment. Actually, his Sector 1 time was extremely good. It was the first sub 21 second Sector 1 time, and look at that, very, very close to matching his own time. Almost, you can't even describe it, how close he was to matching his time through there. Not purple, but fractionally off it. Car attitude again through 5 and 6. Very, very good. This is where he had the trouble last time, using all the road. Plenty of air under the left-hand side tyres. Great control from Brenton Foley. Just fractionally up again. Maybe that little bit of air time just took a little bit of the sting out of what was set to be a really good lap. Can he put it together through his final sector? He loves to put on a show. We've seen that through the ARW DRMs. Really loves to get the back out, although he was very, very measured on Wednesday night, just gone at Barbagallo. Not much of a circuit that he can use to that effect. Is he going to go into the 10s? Yes, he is. Nice job.
This is probably more indicative of the times that we're going to see from the top blokes. So we're going to see if Phil Boak, he's probably going to leave it to the last run, and then we see Gary Neville in his return. And good to see Gary Neville back in the VF Commodore for FCR Motorsport.
So it sure is.
And there's also some of the other FCR cars out there. Will Devonish, incidentally, is also out there. He's about to finish his first flying lap. He's into turn 13 now. Gets a good run through there as well. Nice late apex. Slides a little bit at the very later part of the corner, but we're going to see what his lap time looks like. 1:11.57. So he's got a little bit to improve there, but provisionally fourth at the moment. So we'll look at the car attitude and the number 15 CRE Electrical Commodore. And runs a little bit wide there, so probably a little bit too much understeer at this point in the lap. And he's up on his own PB, so that's good to see. So he's about 1.8 tenths of a second behind Brenton Foley with that not quite purple sector, but very close to purple sector with Brenton Foley. He was only about 5 thousandths of a second off. He runs it up all the way to the AstroTurf again. Middle of the road here. And he's almost gone over there. Oh, wow, look at that. That almost passed the point of no return, but that's going to take, like you said, it's going to take the sting out of his lap. So it's probably ruined his chances of getting forward. But that was looking like a very respectable lap time there, Steve.
Yeah, it was looking a very good lap time for a little while. Very, very controlled through turns 5 and 6. In actual fact, he's pulled the pin on it. Probably a wise choice. So he was definitely not going to improve. But great save through the turn 7 and 8 chicane. That's where I think we're going to see most of our two-wheel action tonight. And Devonish did a great job at keeping it out of the fence. And if he does that in the race, he's certainly going to know how to handle the car. Incidentally, having a look through the list, Gary Neville, as you can see there on the timing screens, actually 61. He's actually GNev 61 is his label in the session. Aldo Benedetti out there for Scuderia Alitalia as well. Who else are we looking at on the circuit? JP Courier is out there as well. So he is currently on an out. I know he's on his first flying lap. We thought he was on his out lap. He's on the first flying lap. So not taking too much curb there through 7 and 8. So realising what his fellow drivers are up to. And let's look at his sector times in a minute. 21.1 first sector, 17.5 in the middle sector. So he's definitely got some time still on the table. This was the man who's at the top of the time sheets. Now, it's a 15-minute session. It's normally a little bit shorter than that. So the last remaining drivers, Benedetti, Slick, Davies, Boak, Courier, all to set times. Courier sets his, goes P5, so just waiting on Boak, Davies, Slick, and Benedetti's on his first flying lap now. Has the Triple Eight got anything more in store? It was the top of the timesheets at practice. And he's had a lot more time here. A little bit less fuel. Conditions slightly different. Nearly 4 tenths down on the current pole time of Foley. So at the moment, Foley the only man inside the 1:11 bracket. Attitude in the car looks good. Looks relatively planted. Not too much understeer. Just the lines that he's taking. So still looking to improve through first two sectors. So in actual fact, this is looking good for a provisional front row. If you can maintain this sort of pace. Just making sure he hits those apexes, gets his lines right. Just not pushing too hard for a really fast lap time here, JP Courier. Just wanted to get the car home, just get himself a good qualifying position. Probably not going to be in the 10. It's going to be a low 11, an 11.1, so not far off. And in actual fact, lost a little bit more time in the end. So at the moment, provisional second row. Phil Boak goes P2. Phil Boak goes P2. His first flying lap, not too far off poleman Foley. So PBF front row lockout at the moment. Very, very close to the wall on the exit of turn 2. First sector split coming up here. Nothing in it. Absolutely nothing in it.
Go either way here, but Phil Boak, second of the cars into the 1:10 bracket. with a 1 minute 10.8 pretty much, and slides a little bit. That's where we saw Jamie Whincup come unstuck in the race on the weekend,
He's
and it's
aborted.
sliding a lot, so he's going to abort that one. So that's ruined his chances, and he's just gone back to the pit lane. Here we go, Aldo Benedetti. He's occupying the car that we normally see Phil Walsh in.
Brian Walsh,
Phil Walsh, same thing. I'm gonna eat my words at some point tonight, and there we go. They taste good. But that's his final flying lap, and he's done a 1 minute 13.3. So Aldo Benedetti is doing a good job for the Italian flag carrier team, Scuderia Alitalia.
and the other news out of that one, the two drivers that did not set a time. So Dwayne Davies and Ricky Slick have packed up the wallflower and gone back to the garage because they've only done their out lap and deciding they're going to start rear of grid. So it'll be DD out of P16, Ricky Slick out of 17, but then your pulse, in actual fact, there's your front row in that first garage there. Brenton Foley, Phil Boak, 1 and 2, PBF front row lockout. They'll be joined by Zach. Great qualifying effort from that young man in the Top Gear racing, the first of the FGX Falcons, alongside him, the man who had a bit of a back-end charge in that first third of this season, JP Courier. So looking to continue his good results and hopefully put the blip of the radar that was Hidden Valley behind him. Back into your top 10, Billy Dougal Salonga, again, looking to recover out of that penalty that he ended up with out of the second race of Hidden Valley. Will Devonish, first to CRE Motorsport cars. Back to Brendan Ross, the first of the FCR cars. Termo, Steve Burko, and Aldo Benedetti. The respectable lap time, sneaking into the top 10. But as the clock goes zero, your pole sitter for the 62 lap feature tonight, Brenton Foley.
It's interesting to see that a couple of the FCR drivers, they want to go from start from pit lane. So I think in a 1 hour race, it will be roughly 1 hour or so. Hopefully there's no safety cars, but roughly 1 hour. I think that might actually come back to help them later on if they can avoid some of the carnage on the first few laps, and sort of if they can drive in clear air and their lap times are fairly good, then what will happen is that they'll actually start to come back to the field and they'll make a bit of a gain there. So it'll be interesting to see if that sort of strategy pays off. But Phil Boak and Brenton Foley, they're starting it off the right way. They're on the front row. So Brenton Foley's got the pole position, and they're both in the 1 minute 10s bracket, which is pretty impressive, isn't it, Steve?
No, it sure is. The only two drivers to get into the 1 minute 10s. Zach was very, very close, couldn't quite make it. Foley was the first one to set the benchmark, and that's quite interesting that only those two managed to get into the 1 minute 10s in qualifying. We actually did see a number of drivers in practice get into the 110s, so maybe just something that they needed to do, just break those tyres in a little bit more, get a couple of laps under their belt before the circuit and the track and the momentum actually started to come to them. This is part of the trouble that some of these drivers struggle with a little bit during qualifying, is that they like to just go out there and set a few lap times consecutively, and then the best one comes out of the lot. It normally comes on lap 3, 4 or 5, but you've really only got 2 laps to do it. That's the way that the cookie crumbles here in the AMSL Super 2 series, and some guys qualify better than others. It's very, very simple.
Yeah, it's a bit like a top 10 shootout in the sense that you've got one out lap and then you have to switch the car on, and every corner you get to, you just have to guess how much grip you've actually got. And in this sense, you've got the out lap, then you've got 2 flying laps, but really you should be trying to set your first flying lap as your best. You should try and bring the tire pressures up a little bit more, and heat up the tire carcass and heat up the brakes and all that sort of stuff. So in that sense, yes, it's very difficult, but it's the same thing all round. And I guess some people are perhaps opting towards a setup that's more towards race focused, bit neutral handling, rather than very oversteery. And an oversteery setup is always quite quick. So it's better to just leave it on a sort of neutral race sort of setup. And in a 1 hour race, if you're there or thereabouts, if you're close to the front, well, it's not too bad. But if you're buried in the middle of the field, then it starts to get a bit worse. You'll start to, if it were raining, like in real life, you'd see nothing. But in Automobilista, of course, you're basically in a traffic jam. So street circuit, it's a bit like a street in the sense that, yes, you are, nose to tail traffic jams all the time.
No, that's right. And one of those things that you just mentioned about, being a street circuit as well, that's one of the things that has been mentioned in the driver's briefing today as well. A reminder about giving the racing room, because the walls are very, very close, making sure that you don't balk someone when in qualifying, which nobody did, which was really good to see. Everyone left themselves plenty of room. The pit entry procedure and the pit exit procedures have been reinforced as well, because again, street circuit, the way that the pit exits feed in on these street circuits can be quite challenging. Most importantly, they did mention about being careful on lap number 1. Now, lap number 1, as we've seen in the supercars, we've seen here time and time again, tends to give a little bit of trouble, especially down at turns 1 and 2 and potentially 3 as well. It's going to be something that I think maybe the guys at the back of the field, so the likes of Dwayne Davies, Ricky Slick, and actual fact a couple of others that have just managed to get themselves into the server now. Mitch Hathaway going to be starting rear of grid. Now, he was running around in practice and cracker as well. They're going to start the rear of the grid. They might stand to benefit from this if there's an early safety car or an early incident down at those couple of corners. And so maybe starting from the pit lane, or at least starting off the back, if they're not starting the pit lane, and allowing a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra gap just to see what carnage transpires ahead, might be to their benefit. Maybe they can potentially stay out of that trouble. Well, before we get any further, speaking of, things that are not trouble, it would be remiss of us if we didn't pull this up here. The ARW 3 Hours of Suzuka. So it's still a little while away. Going to be there on the 15th of September. So Metal Moro AJRs around Suzuka in a 2-man endurance race. The second of the ARW Enduros to be held in consecutive years. Remember the 6 Hours of Spa, Rob Dunt and Sam Smith, or Berto and Sam Smith, as they like to put it, the defending champions of the ARW Enduro Series, and they're going to look to defend their 6-hour crown in the 3 Hours of Suzuka. So still plenty of room for people to sign up for that one. Please get your entries in. All your details that you need are there in the top left-hand corner, tinyurl.com/ARW Suzuka. And very, very much looking forward to that one as well. And also a big thanks to the guys over at RSM and Automobilista Supercars. They're actually putting up the server for the practice sessions and for the weekend. For that, they're able to schedule it a little bit better than having it hosted just out of your computer at your own home. So a massive thanks for them for their support, and for all the guys that have registered so far. Looking forward to having another great endurance event in a couple of months' time. Not too much longer. The last little bits of practice and warm-up are finishing up now. There's not very many drivers actually on the circuit. We're just awaiting the zeros to go, and there it is. And in the next sort of 60 seconds to 2 minutes, we're going to have a full grid of cars for a 62-lap race. Actually, some word coming through on the wire here as well. Brenton Foley having some leg cramps and some leg muscle issues as well on his braking leg, which is left leg. And so he's been advised that if he keeps locking up his brakes under race conditions tonight, it's because his leg keeps going to sleep and he can't feel the pedal. So that's the last thing you want in a 62-lap race around a street circuit, is an hour and a half of your leg going to sleep.
No, it never makes sim racing particularly enjoyable when your leg is going to sleep, but unfortunately sometimes it does happen, and it shows the importance of getting a sim rig and sort of tuning it to the sense that it actually matches your body quite well, and you can actually pump out those laps in and out. And also, I mean, in a couple of months we're going to have the 3 Hours of Suzuka, and that will definitely come into play as well.
Yeah, sure will. The good thing, I guess, about being the 3 Hours Suzuka is that you get to share the driving with a teammate, so you can have as many driver swaps as you like when it comes to the pit stops, as long as you meet the co-driver minimum laps or minimum time count, because it's a timed event. There shouldn't be any trouble. And the likes of Brenton Foley, if you had that issue at the Suzuka 3 Hour, he probably would have been handing over to Phil Boak and said, "You get in the car, I'm going for a walk to try and cure my issues in my leg."
Yeah, that's always handy. You just hand it over and say, "I'm going to go for a walkabout and relax a little bit. Maybe get a burger, maybe get a soft drink. I don't know, something like that." But we're just looking at the grid now, and we've got an all PBF front row. And Brenton Foley with a fantastic lap time, 1 minute 10 in the mid 1 minute 10s, and then followed by his teammate, Phil Boak, in the second of the PBF race engineering cars. Then followed by Zach and he's really coming on gangbusters this far in the season, which is good to see. The Ford flag being flown. Then we've got the first of the HDS racing cars. Sorry, I stand corrected. It's JP's sim shed. It's JP Courier. He's going to start off the second row of the grid in fourth. Then we will find Billy Dougal-Salonga for HDS Racing Pro-Am, and is flying the flag for HDS up the front of the field, and a fairly respectable lap time as well. Will Devonish, we're going to see some consistency out of him again, I hope, because it's always nice to see him up there and giving it a red hot go. Then in seventh place is Brendan Ross. We're not usually accustomed to seeing him this far back. We saw at the start of the season how impressive he was. Hopefully he can make a few positions there. Then he's followed by Termo. He's always there in the Castrol Racing Altima, number 715. So Termo, I don't think he wants to repeat that issue where he went past that point of no return and almost flipped the car. It was sort of at 90 degrees. We'll see that later on in the closing montage. We've got Steve Buerger, the second of the Top Gear racing cars, and he's pulling off into the grass there, so he's matching the green colour on the car. But yeah, hopefully he can stay out of trouble this race. We can see some more consistency out of him, which will be nice to see. Then we've got Aldo Benedetti, and he looks like he might be starting from pit lane. So that leaves number 10 empty. So Cam Rutledge in 11th, he's got no one next to him. And then, sorry, that's Steve Buerger, who's got no one next to him. Then Cam Rutledge in 11th, CRE Motorsport Pro-Am. Then Brownie, the Cracker Racing Team, Penrite Commodore. Rhodey in 010, PBF Pro-Am, PBF Academy, I should say. And then followed by Gary Neville. Good to see him returning. Then Spitwater Cleaners, Altima, that's Glenn Miles. And we've got D2, he's actually, Dwayne Davies is coming into the pits. So Ricky Slick, he's starting from the pits. Dwayne Davies also starting from the pits. And Cracker will bring up the rear of the grid in 18th with Mitch Hathaway in 19th position. So a few missing grid spots here, Steve. I wonder if that's going to sort of play into things. Would it be a little bit better if you get a good start and you just run through it, because you don't need to avoid a slow car on the grid? So we see some of the cars pulling out to pit lane now, getting ready.
Let's go racing, North Queensland style for Super 2. Not a bad launch from Brenton Foley, but his teammate got a much, much better start on the right-hand side of the grid, and he'll have the preferred line through the kink here at turn 1. Side by side they go. Everyone looks relatively settled behind. The animals going 2 by 2. Steve Buerger looks like he might have pinged off a wall there. JP Courier's had a very, very nice start. Gotten past Zach and already threatening. Termo's around in the back. Termo's around at the back, and in actual fact the cars just in the pit lane are about to be released, so not sure what happened to Termo there, whether he did it of his own accord or whether he got turned around. We'll bring this up on replay. Let's have a look at what happened to the 715 Nissan.
So
all by himself.
He's gone on the curb there.
Yeah, all by himself. Just a little bit too much curb. He was very tentative into the turn there. It's probably the right thing, just to take your time, make sure you get through unscathed. But unfortunately for him, he's taken too much curb, and it puts him right the way down the field. But Phil Boak leads, and the Ricky Slick, Aldo Benedetti, and actually Dwayne Davies cars have been released. Well, Dwayne Davies has had an issue. Where's that?
I think he's spun. He's probably spun off the curb, because I see one of the traffic cones there is flipped over.
Yeah, let's have a look what's happened to him. And Mitchell Hathaway hasn't even gotten going. So something's happened to Mitchell Hathaway right at the very beginning of this race. Oh, and the car wouldn't stop as well. So that's what DD's problem is. That's down at turn number 3, I believe, by the looks of things. So he's ended up with some sort of drama there. But he's gotten going again. And that's at least a good thing, but he's some distance off the back of the train at the moment, which at the moment is being led by JP Courier, who's found a way past both Foley and Boak at the end of that lap. Now, that's really, really good from his perspective, having started on the second row of the grid. Zach now is down there in 4th place. In actual fact, we're just picking up on the replay now, and there it is down at turn 1. We'll just rewind it back. And you can see there, it was a pass down the inside at turn 1.
Bit of hip and shoulder action on the later part there, but he hangs tough and he actually gets up to the preferred line into turn 3. And at this point, Phil Boak just has to yield and just slot back in behind. Goes over the curb there. Oh, a few drivers going over the curb there, so a bit rough on the cars. But yeah, JP Courier, now we're starting to see shades of that form that we saw previous to the Darwin round. and he's got a healthy buffer at the moment, about 0.7 of a second.
Having a look at the top 10 here as well, there's 9 seconds separating the top 10, all really strung out, but most of that top 10 you could see just in that frame of shot there as well. Look at the different lines being taken through turn 2 as well. JP taking a lot more road compared to the PBF pair as well. Are they just going into a little bit of tyre preservation as well this early in the race? Given it's a 62 lap encounter, the laps will go quick in a minute 10, minute 12 lap time, and that left-hand rear tyre is definitely going to cop a pounding. JP using a lot of the exit curb and the AstroTurf kicking up the dust, whereas the PBF pair behind aren't. A couple of them taking a little bit more curb than each other as well. Some of them just playing a little bit more of a measured game here this early in the piece. Do they think that they haven't got the pace to go with JP at this point in time, or do they think the tyres are going to fade on them a little bit later on?
So we've got the top 5 now. They're in the train right now. Brendan Ross has sort of fallen off there. Oh, big moment. That's a big moment for Foley there. He's going around, so we might get that on replay, but he was gonna spin round out of turn 12. The car attitude was looking very scary right then.
That's given some incentive to Zach behind as well. And Brendan Foley had a bit of a heart-stopping moment just down here, tucked in behind his teammate. So plenty of action very, very early on. Oh yeah, the back end just really tried to get away from Foley there in number 1. Zach had a bit of a look at the inside there. In actual fact, got alongside, just couldn't get the drive off the corner. Foley had that preferred line, so he couldn't quite arrest third place away there from the number 1, could Zach. But he's still right there. Will Devonish is nicely tucked into this battle as well, just sitting there waiting, watching, and they've managed to kick away from Brendan Ross, who's had a good start as well. He's moved up 1 spot. Look at all the car attitude, the curbs being taken by Boak and Foley.
Yeah, Devonish went up 2 wheels in the air as well. But interesting to note that most of those drivers, they actually went all the way out over the yellow line, and Devonish is sort of taking a bit more of a conservative line. So potentially, if we're going to see a tyre conservation race, then Devonish is looking in good stead there, because he's hanging on to the back of this train, and he's no slouch in terms of car speed. So Zach, he's having a bit of a look there, but the corner radius is a little bit too tight when you go down the inside, and he's going to start falling back from the rear bar of Brendan Foley.
Go back to the battle for 6th and 7th place here. Billy Dougal-Salonga pursuing Brendan Ross. These two have been nose to tail for the opening couple of laps. Brendan Ross up 1 place from where he started. Billy Dougal-Salonga just going back a couple of spots.
So I think this could be a strategy play here, because potentially if they are making a little bit less in lap speed and not using the tyre quite as much, then they won't have to pit for tyres, or they can extend the tyre life and then they'll have fresher tyres at the end, potentially. But I'm not sure what's going on. If it could be that, or it could be they just don't have quite the car pace. But they're staying together here, battles on battles in this field, and good to see that everyone's pretty much keeping out of trouble at a street circuit, about 2.98 kilometres, and everyone's sort of finding their space on the track.
Yeah, they sure are. So Brendan Ross, in terms of the battles within battles in the season, so Brendan Ross is behind Mitchell Hathaway in the point standings. Now, if Mitchell Hathaway's DNF, if Brendan Ross has at least finished the race, he should leapfrog him into what is currently 4th place in the standings overall. For Billy Dougal-Salonga, he's behind JP Courier in the standings, so with JP miles ahead, that doesn't look set to change hands at the moment. But Steve Buerger is behind them at the moment. As he has a look down the inside here, Billy Dougal-Salonga, but he's not quite close enough. He needed to be a little bit later on the brakes just to pull alongside, and should have had the room to at least pull that up, and would have allowed Brendan Ross to just ease the brake out a little bit and allow him the space. Oh, a little bit of a shunt there.
Tail action there. So he's ended up in the fence. He needs to redress that.
Yep.
And there we go. The lights come on in frustration.
Yep.
So hopefully he redresses that. Otherwise, there's going to be a report and possibly some issues with the DSO later on.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be investigated if that's not redressed. And oh, look at this. Brendan Ross is really wrestling that car now. He's aggressive because he's angry, and we saw the lights flash, and we did show you in the replays a little bit earlier on this evening that was him that did the similar thing to JP Courier when he got crowded at Hidden Valley. I mean, rightfully so, he had a right to be angry, but same thing again, he's been punted off into the wall, graze of the wall, and he's now a bit upset, and I tend to agree that BDS needs to hand that position back. That that hasn't been redressed, that's going to be probably, I hate to say it, a slam dunk penalty come the end of this race. If it's reported by Brendan Ross, and I expect it to be reported.
Yeah, definitely. I think Brendan Ross was in. I don't think he did anything wrong there by turning the lights on for that momentary second. He's just reminding, hey, you need to redress here. There's one lap gone. We've got a yellow flag zone here.
Glenn
so
Miles.
that's Glenn Miles, I think. So he's going to go a lap down.
There he is down there. So he's just gone off down at turn 3, and he looks like he might have been there for a little bit, but at least he's in the runoff area, which is the important thing for split water cleaners in the Nissan Altima. And yep, just a simple out-braking manoeuvre.
So same thing has happened to Dwayne Davies.
And he did the right thing here too, just by staying out of the way of the drivers behind and letting them get on with business before he got back on the track. Now he's a little bit of a moving chicane here at the moment, just in behind Cam and so behind Will Devenish. Had to let a couple of the other cars through that were behind him, and at least he's going again in the number 69. Back to the lead of this race, and JP Courier hasn't managed to clear out. He's got a 1.2 second advantage. Just looking at the lap times that they're doing, they're not too dissimilar. In actual fact, Brenton Foley was quicker that last lap time around by 0.3 of a second. Best laps all in the 1 minute 11s for the top 5. I mean, have a look at this. So JP Courier's best lap time is the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 11.175.
Sorry, Steve, I'll interrupt you here. Zach and Will Devenish have managed to get past Phil Boak, and Phil Boak goes back ahead of Zach and Will Devenish, so we might have to get that on replay. Oh, it's very, very willing in this sort of section here, this 3-car battle pack. We might have to get that on replay. We'll see how it goes. So that's the early part of it. So that's they've both gotten past here, and there's a bit of rubbing, a bit of panel rubbing as well. Devenish tries to go with him, and then they both go wide a little bit there. So Phil Boak plays it a little bit conservative, and he gets those spots back. So very impressive to watch this sort of racing, this ding-dong battle.
Plenty of space left by all of them as well, and a little bit of a love tap on the rear bumper from Zach to Phil Boak there as well, and that battle resumes. But I was just saying the point just about fastest laps. So JP Courier, quickest lap of the race, 1 minute 11.175, which has now immediately just been surpassed by Brenton Foley by 4 thousandths of a second. So that's a new quickest lap there. And then Boak, Zach and Devenish, look at this for lap times. 11.459, 11.464 and an 11.485 between these three currently on screen. So their lap times and their lap pace are very, very good. In actual fact, they all registered track violations on that last lap as well. So that's really interesting to see what they got picked up for. I would imagine it's possibly off of that turn 3 curb. Well, something happened there because they've now come up with the last lap. The person finally registered with... Not sure what happened there, but Will Devenish actually didn't register a lap time for him, so maybe he was the one that ended up with a track violation out of all of that. In actual fact, he's having a look on Zach here as well. That's a high-speed spot to make a pass, but if you're alongside, you've got the line for turn 11. On this occasion, Devenish does not.
I think he had to abort that move at the 11th hour there because he just wasn't quite far enough. But Zach, he's actually trying to keep off Will Devenish, and he's succeeding so far. Will Devenish is applying a lot of pressure, but they can't fight each other for too long because Phil Boak is going to escape, as we've also seen Brenton Foley and JP Courier escape.
A bit further down the field, looking at Turmo and Cracker battling over the last 2 spots inside the top 10. And actually Turmo, they managed to kick away from Cracker here, and Turmo's now threatening for the 9th place position, currently being held by Cam Rutledge and CRE Motorsport ZB.
He's going to go for the switchback, but couldn't quite make it there, so not enough drive off the corner. So he stays about a couple of car lengths behind Cam Rutledge, and Cam Rutledge lives to fight another day.
He sure does. Turmo's recovered relatively well from that early spin on lap 1 at this corner right here. Leaves plenty of room on away from the curb this time around. He's learned his lesson. At least he's back inside the top 10, so good result so far for Turmo. Currently sits 8th in the standings, and tied, as we said, on points with Steve Buerger, who's actually ahead of him on track at the moment in that little battle. And then they're only 39 points behind Ricky Slick, who's down in 14th at the moment, so they stand to gain some points on him between now and the end of this race if they stay where they are. Rutledge moves across to cover the line through 10. Late dive here, goes Turmo down the inside. As he managed to pull it up under brakes? Not quite. Just manages to get away with that. That was a very, very opportunistic pass, and Cracker wants to buy into this as well if he can. He's not close enough to Cam Rutledge to put a move on, although he might see if he can pull alongside down the straight here. In actual fact, the drive out of the final corner is similar. He just needs to set himself up here, Cracker, for an opportunity down the inside into turn 2, but he thinks better of it and says, nope, Cam's covering the line too far down the middle, I don't want to risk an accident. A very, very brave move from Turmo, late on the brakes down to turn 11, 9th place.
Yeah, Turmo sort of cemented that now, but I think it was really good of Cam Rutledge to just sort of let him go, because in this sort of long race, there's about 50 laps to go, so just best to let him go and then just get your head down, focus back on your rhythm, and just sort of plug away at your own race.
Yeah, you could have cut him back underneath, having gone deep there at turn 11 as well, but thought, no, I'm not going to risk trying to get underneath just in case cuts back across the line, because the next corner, as you can see here, this is where the passing move got done down at turn 11. The next turn comes up fairly quickly and cuts right across that apex there, so good racetrack awareness from Cam Rutledge just to let that go. In actual fact, Cracker's got the job done on Cam Rutledge as well, so that looks like it took place at a very similar spot as we cut to our replay. Plenty of replay action being used tonight. Lots and lots of action here at the Townsville Street Circuit. And yeah, he did. He sized him up. Same spot that Turmo got him as well, and was alongside. And Cam just eased the brake. And in actual fact, it was a gift at the end of the day. Much, much better than what Turmo had to do. First drive-through penalty of the race for Glenn Miles. Now, he is currently out on circuit, so it looks like an exploitation of the track limits would be the reason for the offence there. Unless he's just come out of the pit lane. In actual fact, I think he might have just come out of the pit lane because he's just been passed by Ricky Slick and Brownie and gone 2 laps down. So, apologies to Glenn. It looks like that is going to be a pit lane speeding infringement. Very early stop in the race, so maybe a little bit of damage or something going on. But here's the first victim of the pit lane speed limits for this evening. Meanwhile, we go back to the head of the field because this gap has started to close down a little bit here as we just see, as we're flicking through, the battle between Zach and the PBF car of Phil Boak. And Devonish has decided not to buy into this at all. We were about to go back to have a look at the leaders because that gap has really started to just be chipped away a little bit, just on 1 second at the moment.
These blokes better be careful because they're using up a lot of tyre in this battle, and I'd say that I'll wager a bet that Will Devonish has the best seat in the house. He's just watching, and he's trying to make a move but thinks better of it. Pulls back in behind Zach. Zach is trying to harass the back of the PBF Race Engineering Commodore of Phil Boak, but Brent Foley and JP Correa, they sort of run away here. So Brent Foley's another 6 seconds up the road, and JP Correa another second in front of him. So, and he actually manages to get the job done, and Devonish has followed him through as well. So ever the opportunist, Will Devonish, and they're staying close. So you can Boak get back up there. No, not quite. So the sort of corner radius is very, when you tighten it up so much, you get a very poor run, and unfortunately, Phil Boak couldn't make the move on Devonish there, but he's in prime position for making a move into turn 2, and he's out there and he's braking. Last late breakers, here we go. He's up alongside. Does Devonish hang tough? Yes, he tries to hang tough as much as he can, but he's going to be on the wrong side of the road for turn 3, and he's probably going to have to yield here, and he does. So good smart driving, and he gets the wall there a little bit as well, so hopefully no damage. And yeah, so they live to fight another day. And a bit of two-wheel action there for Devonish. We know he's got some pretty good car control, but Zach has sort of escaped the clutches of Phil Boak temporarily. And the 2 drivers in front, they're escaping, and they're almost at a 10-second lead.
Yeah, fantastic scrap between these 3 guys. You said Zach's just managed to pull a couple of car lengths or 2 on Phil Boak for the moment. Devonish and Boak resumed that battle. Not this time. So the positions last time around, it was Zach from Devonish from Boak as they crossed the line. Now it's Zach from Boak from Devonish. So they continue to trade places fairly but squarely. Great camaraderie and great respect between these guys. They've been racing for quite a while in AMS Oz, the 2 Commodore drivers. And they know what's permissible and what is not permissible. There's a little bit of a puff of smoke, and it looks like that's some lap traffic a bit further ahead of these 2. That's going to be the 15th place man of Gary Neville and the 16th place man of Dwayne Davies just ahead. Oh, a little wiggle from from Phil Boak there. Now, he got a little bit of a helping hand from Devonish, but I think he was already losing the back end of that car down there at turn 3. I want to pick this up on the replay just to make sure that there wasn't a prior love tap to make that happen, because it looked like under brakes the back end of this car was getting away from Phil Boak, and he just got helped on the way. Yeah, the back just wanted to... Devonish was already committed to the corner, and just a little bit of a mid-corner moment there for Phil Boak, and just a little bit of a tap allowed Devonish to go through there. So I don't think that's going to be a major issue, and I think that even Phil will know that he was slightly out of control with that car for just a few moments, and that that Will was already well and truly committed to that corner.
I think in that situation just sort of adds insult to injury, because he knew he was not in the ideal place. He was going well wide of the ideal line, so unfortunately Devonish nailed him at the wrong part of the turn. But no blame on Devonish, I would agree there, and hopefully the DSO agrees if it's reported at all. So they're just rounding up Gary Neville in number 61 for FCR Motorsport, and he resumes his battle with Dwayne Davies. But now we've seen Phil Boak. He's sort of gone from second back to fifth in the last successive run of laps.
And Zach's really moved away from this pair as well as they've continued to fight and squabble. So he's turned around and set his sights after Brenton Foley and JP Courier, who have really narrowed up in the last couple of laps as well. Now that gap had gotten out to no more than about 1.3 seconds earlier in the race, but now it's less than a second. In actual fact, it's less than a half a second, and I dare say it's going to be even less. That's probably going to be about a quarter second as they cross the line. No, a little bit more than that, 4 and a bit tenths. But this is on between the current man in second place in the standings and the man who currently occupies 10th place in the standings, looking to go for his 4th race win. Foley looking for his 5th. Yellow flag down here at turn number 3.
It might be Rhodey.
Yeah, that is.
Up there it is.
And doing the same thing Glenn Miles did, just getting out of the way, letting them continue on and not rejoining the track until they're safely through. So good awareness from the drivers. The overall driving standard has been very, very good and very, very high, as noted by the DSO when the reports came in for Hidden Valley. We haven't had very many reports of real concern. Hidden Valley was really the worst of all of them. They've only had, one or two at Tasmania and 1 or 2 sporadically throughout the season. The overall standard has been very, very high.
No, I tend to agree there. I think a lot of these issues tend to get resolved before it ends up with a report to the DSO. But here we go. Brenton Foley's getting very close to the back of JP Courier. So maybe JP Courier is probably buttoning it off a little bit. Maybe he's going to make his first stop. We're not quite sure. But there is also the fact that these two drivers, while they are fighting over the lead, they've got Zach, who's very rapidly approaching, and that gap is coming down. It came down from 8 seconds now to 7 seconds. So we're going to see he's just ever so slightly just jumping up there. So, he's it's pretty much a tenth of a second each way.
Yeah. So you can see here on the timing screen, Zach did 11.9 last time around to this pair with the 12 dead. So he is slightly quicker. And in actual fact, in Sector 1, I think is probably his worst sector. But in this time, he's actually lost about 2 tenths to these guys as they've been rounding up the lap traffic. Lap traffic's fallen kindly for them so far, which is really good. Zach, when we look a bit further back, he's got some clean air behind him at the moment. And Phil Boak setting a purple Sector 1 on that lap just around as well. A 21.278 is his quickest sector there. Good to see Ricky Slick getting out of the way of this pair as well. Brendan Ross with a drive-through penalty. Now, where's he on the track? He's now currently in 7th place. So here he is here. So something's happened to Brendan Ross as a result of to get that penalty, and he's on track. I dare say it's going to be a track violation. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's gone over the yellow line there, all 4 wheels.
Very, very obvious, that one. That is not good news for the 444. He's going to come out of that 7th place and serving it straight away. And he was battling away there with BDS for a little while, so he just dropped away in that battle. And one of the men who's up in the top half dozen in the point standings, in actual fact, he's 5th overall, still going to get points enough to go past Mitchell Hathaway at this rate, but this is going to sting. This is a 40k limit in this pit lane as well, so this is not a good result for Brendan Ross this early in the race.
Definitely adding a lot of pain to his race tonight, and it just hasn't been that good for him so far. He got sort of nailed by Billy Dougal-Salonga, and he didn't really give the position back. So I think he's going to be a little bit cranky underneath that closed face helmet as he falls in behind. I think that's Cracker.
Correct.
And he's just in front of
Aldo Benedetti there.
Benedetti. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's only lost the one spot, but he's under a bit of pressure here. And the other thing to think too is that I dare say he is going to be making a report about that incident with BDS as well. So there will be, I guess, some pain that'll be eased with regards to that. Probably still a little bit hot under the collar as a result of that incident. But putting that aside, he's still got a race to run. He's still got the balance of 50. Actually, looking what have we got here? We're working lap 19 at the moment. So we're going to have well and truly another 43 laps to go. So he's just got to not worry about the incident from earlier on in the race and just put his head down and get going. We return to the battle at the front, and as we work our way through, Devonish and Zach having to negotiate some traffic. Now, Zach has just come back to Will just a little bit, as the top two have the gap has just eased out just a little bit in the last 30 seconds as well. Not sure if that was a sort of mistake on Foley's part. It was a lot closer than that.
It's probably a lap traffic issue. So as they approach lap traffic, perhaps JP Courier has been balked a little bit by lap traffic because there are some corners you can't really get out of the way of. And I think the same has happened to Zach now. So the margin has stabilised to about 7.245 seconds. So that's between Brenton Foley and Zach. And then there's about 0.6 of a second now between JP and Brenton Foley. And let's see if there can be a bit more of a battle like in laps gone by.
Noting Foley had actually set a purple Sector 1 that lap around as well at 21.050, and his Sector 2 time was actually looking very good. He was actually looking on track for a very, very good lap time, and just, I think a mistake just around the Sector 2 split, which is down around just before the turn 7 and 8 chicane, may have brought him unstuck because he's really romped right onto the back of JP Courier now. He's had to take a very defensive line and probably a little bit more curb than he liked there through the turn 8 right-hander. And Foley's going to look to have a go here, but JP's alert to it. He knew that
just parked in the middle of the road.
And that's fair. That's completely fair. He knew that he was under some pressure there, and he made the defensive move very, very early to JP Courier, and that's precisely what he needed to do. Lap traffic gets out of the way. That's in the form of the 10th place man in Cracker. So he's come out of that battle, and actually the fact that he was ahead of Brendan Ross. Aldo Benedetti's gone through on Brendan Ross, and then Cracker's come in, so no change of position for Brendan Ross following his drive through penalty. They've got Cam Rutledge here. Now, JP's got the lights on, so that's completely within the rules. That's to say, hey, I'm the race leader, jump out the way, we're coming through. And Foley will just ride on the coattails here for a little bit, I would say. Oh,
track limits violation, and maybe caught the wall there as well. So maybe he's carrying a bit of damage. So maybe a bit hot under the collar for JP Courier. But there is a battle here at the moment, and Cam Rutledge does the right thing. He goes on the grass and lets them through. So the battle resumes, unencumbered by any lap traffic.
Sure does. These two press on. Still with the lights on, JP. I think you're more worried about if there's any lap traffic a bit further ahead. Lights come off now, so that's all well and good. Phil Boak drive-through penalty, so the track limits are coming into play again, or are they? Where is Phil Boak? He's actually, I think he may have actually just exited the pit lane.
No, you're right there. He did exit the pit lane. He's probably lit up the rear tyres as he's taken off the pit lane speed limiter. So he's probably done the same thing as, who was the
Glenn
other
Miles.
driver? Glenn Miles has done that as well. So the problem with that is that with these high horsepower cars, you get off the pit limiter and you spin up the rear wheels, and then unfortunately you go 41 kilometres an hour. And I mean, it's 1 kilometre an hour, that's all it takes. And unfortunately he's going to drop probably about 35 seconds in this excursion of the pit lane.
Well, you're absolutely right. Having a look at the margin at the top of the standings, it was 156 points between Boak and Foley, with 300 points on offer for a win as well in the feature race lengths. You've got to remember it's a sprint race format. Each race win is worth 150 points. The longer distance format, a la tonight, is worth 300. And at the moment, he is currently P7. He's going to fall back somewhere around Ricky Slick at this rate as he continues to go about his business. So he hasn't come in to serve that penalty this time around. Probably knows he's got a little bit more lap speed and probably needs to try and get a little bit more time. He'll know what the run through the pit lane is going to cost him. You'll probably want to try and stay ahead of Ricky Slick here. Now, some of these drivers have already stopped. Like, look at Billy Dougal-Salonga. He's up there in P2 as Foley looks like he's already come in. He's decided to pull the trigger and come out of that battle. And I think I'm just seeing here on the screens here, JP Courier's in as well. So our race leader in as well. So covering off Foley having come in for a stop. So we're starting to see this shake out. Some of these drivers have already come in and stopped, and some of them are coming in for the first time. Now look at the lap count there, Hans. 23 laps gone. This looks like to me already we're staring down the barrel of 2 stops.
Yeah, definitely. It's 1/3 into the race, and also JP Courier and Brenton Foley, they were quite close together, so we're going to see if there is a bit of an undercut advantage here as
That's Ricky Slick.
Ricky Slick is coming in, and JP Courier is resetting himself, and Brenton Foley is on the main straight now. He's just passing the start-finish line. So, and is it going to be a Brenton Foley lead at the moment? Yes, it is, and the tyres are already warmed up, so move JP Courier back to second. And he's going to have to race control penalty, drive-through penalty for Ricky Slick. So that's probably coming out of pit lane as well.
Yeah, geez, look at that. There's 3 drivers have been pinged already for pit lane infringements in the feature-length race. We've had quite a lot of sprint races going on in the last several rounds of the AMSL Super 2. So it's understandable that the drivers don't need to worry about using the pit lane, but it's the one thing that they need to remember when it comes to a feature-length race. Boys, you've got to stop. You've got to make sure you know how to get on and off pit road. Getting on and off doesn't appear to be the issue tonight. It's how quickly you do it. And have a look at Foley's outlap. It'll be interesting to see what JP Courier's outlap was as a result. Foley's outlap was, actually it says here 1:16, but before that I think he'd actually done something around the 1:46 by the look of it, because Courier's in lap was 48. And we'll get a bit of a read on it here, because Foley was only within about within a half a second probably when he came in.
So that's a really good strategy play there. Brent Foley's managed to pass him without actually having to use tyres. So that's pretty impressive, wouldn't you say, Steve?
I think it was too. Have a look at that. The outlap for JP Courier was 1:17 compared to Foley's 1:16. So a faster in-lap from Foley and a faster outlap as well has netted him first place for the moment. He has got traffic though. Most of the field, actually half the field now, is a lap down. Some of these guys we've said have already stopped. Some of them have not stopped. Actually, who out there hasn't stopped? I think actually the field is pretty well cleansed now in terms of the first stops are over and done with. And Aldo Benedetti has just come in, so out of 6th place, I think he's the last man to stop as the field now starts to cycle past him. So corrected race order at the moment is going to be Brenton Foley from JP Courier. Now, we didn't see this. Zach and Will Devonish have switched places now. They were 4th and 3rd respectively when they came in for their stops, so either a mistake from Zach somewhere along the line, or maybe a bit of damage repair or something that may have happened. We have seen a few cars just grazing a few walls. JP Courier's in again. What's going on here? Did he not get enough fuel in the car?
Oh, maybe he's not. Maybe he's forgotten to refuel. So that's even more drama for JP Courier. He was showing some good speed, even to add to the slow in-lap and slow out-lap.
Well, it's tyres, I think, because look, the car's just gone up on the jacks. So this is most unusual. Is it a tyre-related thing?
Maybe he forgot to change the tyres.
Another penalty for Brendan Ross. So that's 2 now for Brendan Ross. Where's he in the list order at the moment? He's currently 9th, and he's going to have been pinged for another track violation. So goes from bad to worse. 2nd drive-through penalty for Brendan Ross. What on earth is going on out here? This is normally not what we see.
Drama upon drama this race. But otherwise,
oh no!
Oh, look at this. Oh, disaster for Brendan Ross. He just got it all crossed up, and he's gotten another penalty trying to come into pit lane. So that's probably his race over and out. Over and done. That's unfortunate.
Let's have a look at this on the onboard replay, because this is most unusual. So he's done the right thing, tried to come in and serve that penalty. Too much speed, and I think he just tried to carry a bit too much speed to the control line, and now struggling to get it back into pit lane.
it's incredibly disappointing for Brendan Ross. We thought that he was going to be one of our form guys for the season, and unfortunately, it's going to be another drive-through penalty. And once he finishes this one, it's another drive-through penalty after that.
Yeah.
So it's just come in thick and fast with Brendan Ross, drama upon drama, and an absolute disaster for FCR Motorsport tonight.
Yeah, well, the third penalty, I've just worked out what it's going to be now. It's going to be for, believe it or not, for track violation infringement, because he attacked the pit lane line so aggressively and ended up sliding across the grass. The game's actually pinged him for a track violation, and he would have done that. Now, who's down there at turn number 3? Is that Rhodey again? I think it may very well be Rhodey down there. Yes, it is. So
yeah, it is. So he's made the same mistake as before. It's just gone straight on.
yeah, here he is on the replay now. Outbraked himself. And I heard a big crunch. I'm wondering if he tried to flick spin the car. Yeah, he tried to flick spin the car, and there's a tyre barrier there, Rhodey. That does not compute. And made it even worse.
After a 1 million point turn, he's back facing the right way, and he's waiting for traffic. Give way to the right, then we turn left. Make sure you put your signals on. But no, he's back in the running for the race now. He's in 17th. And thankfully our attrition rate isn't too bad, Steve. It's only Mitch Hathaway DNF, but more like a DNS in fact, because he didn't even make it out of the garage.
No, he made it out of the garage, but he just didn't really make it to the first sector timing split. So something happened there as Rhodey's decided, you know what, I've got some damage, I'm going to come in and repair the car. Maybe this may actually be his scheduled stop, I think, because we're currently on lap 25 for him. The race leaders are a couple of laps further on, so I think this probably might be Rhodey's first stop. So maybe he needed to stop a lap or two early. Maybe the tyres are just gone on him, but at least he's still circulating. As you said, the attrition rate is very, very low at the moment. Only the one retirement, which really effectively is the did not start because he really didn't make it to the first timing split in Mitch Hathaway. But a number of drivers, a number of laps down already. Have a look. We're looking at the race leader here, Brenton Foley, and you can see the sheer amount of drivers are already a lap down, nearly 2/3 the field over a lap or more down. So look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drivers already a lap down. 2 laps down. 1 3 laps down. 1 6 laps down. So, I mean, the guys that are normally at the back end of the field, your Glenn Miles and your roadies, are out there for a bit of fun and just to get some experience. They're not too stressed about, worried about being a lap or two down. Some of your more experienced campaigners, your Steve Burko, your Cam Rutledge, your Brendan Ross, more importantly, are not really accustomed to being a lap down this early into a long distance race. And you mentioned it before, we were talking about Brendan Ross. He's had a stellar year already. Finished second in the Bathurst 3 hour earlier on in the year, the AMSL's Bathurst 3 hour, finished second to Foley and Zuris in that race. Made a few little mistakes in that endurance race, but he did drive very, very well in the Mercedes AMG. Had a really good run in the GT3 World Challenge that finished up a couple of weeks ago. 3rd place overall on the season for that. He was the leading Pro-Am driver in that series, although he's effectively probably classed as a pro driver now, given his stature and the results that he's been able to pull over the time. And he's been very, very good in the AMS Super 2 as well. If we take a look at his standings, where he is in 5th place, he's had a win, he's had a 2nd place, he's had 2 third places, a 4th and a 5th, and then the other results that he's had that have been better than that, a 9th and 8th and 11th, and a did not finish at the first race at Winton. So he hasn't had a terrible season so far, but this is starting to become sort of his Achilles heel at the moment. The last 3 races, 11th, the 2nd race at Winton, Hidden Valley a 5th and the 9th, and currently occupying the 14th place on the standings at the moment for Brendan Ross. So points standings and points tallies starting to go a little bit further south at a rate that he probably doesn't want to be seeing. He really wants to be going north in the point standings.
Yeah, definitely. I think the wheels have sort of fallen off his wagon thus far in the season, but hopefully we can see there's still a long way to go. There's still almost halfway of the season to go. So what's interesting is that we might be able to see Brendan Ross have a return to form, but yeah, like I said, unfortunately it is sort of falling off the bandwagon at the moment. As we see on the main straight, the gap of 7.2 seconds, that's Brenton Foley ahead of Will Devenish. So Will Devenish has managed to get up there just by really good strategy and just knowing when to hold them and when to fold them in these longer races, which is pretty impressive. And Zach is holding down 3rd position at the moment, another 6 seconds behind. So he's 15 seconds ahead of Billy Douglas Salonga, but there's a bit of a cloud over BDS, and whether Brendan Ross will report that incident. So JB Courier in 5th, incidentally. They were setting some really good sectors just before. So incidentally, Brenton Foley, he looks like he's setting a pretty good sector in Sector 2. So we'll see if that's a purple sector. It is. So new best Sector 2, that's 17.15 seconds. That's pretty good at this stage of the race, but new tyres helps it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. At least, and this is what we talked about with qualifying as well, that some of these drivers just like to get their eye in qualifying and then go for their flying lap. But I think in Foley's case, as the fuel load burns off and the tyre wear sort of gets to about that sort of 80% or 75% gone, to go on the tyre carcass, his car sort of tends to become alive in some of the sectors, and we know he knows how to handle a car. He can get the car sideways, and his car control is incredible. In actual fact, Devonish at the moment is doing his utmost to peg him at the gap the way that it is. In actual fact, it was quicker on the last time around, so Foley had a really scruffy. Actual fact, his middle sector was surpassed by Devonish last time around. It was a 16.5 to a 17.1.
Oh, new best Sector 1.
The new best Sector 1 from Foley, 2 purple with a 20.948. Now, Devonish has gone up clarified into the race lead, and yeah, he is. What's going on here? So has Foley made a bit of a mistake? We need to take a look at this because, yeah, he did.
So that's turn 3, the action part of the circuit at the moment.
That
Just
is,
people outbraking themselves and understeering off into it. Glad he didn't clout the wall, did he? Oh, very soft sort of clout of the wall.
So not only did he set the purple first sector, no wonder he set the purple first sector. We just have to wind it back a little bit here. Outbraked himself, so that's why the purple first sector came up, because he didn't hit the marks at the right spot. He just managed to keep it out of the tyre barrier there as well. And then Devonish had already gone through, so wow. Actions aplenty. And immediately a 7-second lead for Foley suffers a 10-second swing because he now trails by 3 seconds.
I want to see what's interesting about this, the gap between Devonish and Foley, if it sort of stabilises at 3.1 seconds. But if it starts to sort of seesaw a little bit, then we know perhaps one has got more pace than the other. So we'll have a look at it now. So he's just got up a 10th in the first sector. So Devonish maybe doesn't quite have as much speed, but his consistency definitely is there or thereabouts.
Yeah, it certainly is. There's one thing about Will that's very, very good. His consistency and his lap pace is very, very good over the long distance. We did see, until he had his connection issues at the very first race of the season in Adelaide, that he was right up there and doing very, very well in what was then the VF Commodore with the sponsored, I think, with the Holden dealer team or the Young Lions. It was a combination of the liveries.
HSV dealer team.
HSV dealer team livery is what it was. Thank you for your correctiveness.
And the Larry bar.
And the Larry
that
bar.
was good fun to see.
We did make mention about the Larry bar a little while ago. Since then, he's changed to the ZB and teamed up with Cam Rutledge. But his consistency has always been a very, very strong suit, especially as well in the GT3 World Challenge Series, where he did manage to get a handle on the Lamborghini Huracan right toward the end of the year. But he's been doing some great things here in AMS Oz Super 2. He currently is 3rd in the point standings. Looking at his tally here as well, 2 disconnects in the first 3 races. Well, there you go. And then looking at everything else. So 2 seconds, 3 third places, 3 fourths, and a 5th, and then 2 disconnects. So he's a top 5 consistent performer, currently well and truly entrenched at the head of the top 5. And that's the biggest thing about him compared to some of his rivals nearby. Look at Phil Boak's worst result is 14th and 7th, and it did not finish. There was also 2 disconnects for Foley, and his worst outside of that is 6th. And the pursuing pack behind him is sort of a little bit all over the place in terms of times, but very, very consistently staying inside the top 5, just a little bit wide there at the final corner. And Foley's just managed to close that gap down a little bit now. It's going to be about 2.1 seconds as they cross the line. So he's chopped a bit more time out, but there was a little bit of lap traffic on that particular occasion. Now they're going to start to turn their attention to when their next pit stops are going to be. We're probably going to think somewhere around lap 46, 47, I'd say, Hans, is when we might be expecting to see some of these drivers in, based on they pitted on lap 23.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. They might try and stretch it in that middle sort of section and maybe have a fresh run to the end, but I mean, doubtful at this sort of stage, because there is a bit of, there's sort of gaps along in the field now. Everyone's sort of found their little sort of buffer space right now. So I think the closest battle we have in the field is between Turmo and Benedetti. So everyone else is otherwise quite open in terms of position. But then there's lap traffic involved as well. Incidentally, Brenton Foley has managed to negotiate the lap traffic. That was Brownie in the Cragar Racing Team car, the Penrite Commodore. So Devonish is definitely going to come under attack very soon, but he's managed to stay out of trouble so far, and he's definitely on for a podium result. Let's hope.
Well, 35 laps now in the books for the race leader. Corrected race order is Will Devonish from, if I'm going the right way, from Brenton Foley. Zach's been keeping his nose clean. Good podium position so far for him. Billy Dougal Salonga in P4, but with a question mark over his head at the moment. JP Courier having stopped twice. Not sure why he stopped for a second time, but the car did go up on the jacks, so not sure if it was a tyre issue or a fuel issue or some sort of problem. But he is out of the race lead and into P5. Still got plenty of time to go. Phil Boak, having been in the thick of the battle for P3, 4 and 5 early on in the race, now finds himself in 6th place. Aldo Benedetti's moved up quite nicely in the Scuderia Alitalia Falcon up into P7. Just ahead of Turmo, this is the closest battle on the track at the moment. Turmo recovering to where he started this race, having turned himself around at the second turn on the first lap. Back into the top 10 is Cam Rutledge, up 2 places from where he started this race, and Steve Burko's lost 1 spot, but still inside the top 10. So both, so the team cars for both CRE Motorsport, Top Gear Racing, and PBF Race Engineering currently inside the top 10, which is good to see.
Yellow flag in turn 3 zone again. I think that was sorry, not Brownie. That was Rhodey. So we're looking at Brownie on screen now. Got a bit of damage, bonnet damage there. So he's managed to, he's sort of, I guess, the 3rd or the 4th car a lap down.
Yeah, he is. So he is the 3rd car currently a lap down. And we go back to Cracker. So both the team cars, the Penrite team cars with bonnets missing. Ricky Slick in 13th, just getting the blue flags for JP Courier at the moment. Back to the other FCR car in Gary Neville, 61. Then there's Rhodey, and then back to Glenn Miles, and we've now officially lost not only Dwayne Davies, but we've also lost Brennan Ross as well. So Brennan Ross not going to advance any further in the point standings tonight. So not a good weekend at the racetrack, or a good Thursday night in our case, for the FCR stable. Brennan Ross out of this race. In actual fact, he retired on lap 28, so some time ago, so we missed that. Dwayne Davies on 31, even though D2 Racing is a satellite team out of the FCR Motorsport. They occupy the same Discord. The only 2 remaining drivers for FCR in the race, Ricky Slick out of P13, Gary Neville out of P14, both currently 2 laps down to the race leader.
So we're rapidly approaching the last third of this race. Again, there's someone off the road at turn 3. Let's see who it is. Yellow flag. The race is neutralised at that section. We'll see. Yeah, it's Rhodey again. So Rhodey's struggling. He's struggling to get the car slowed down. We've also seen Brenton Foley struggle there, and many, many other people. It's almost the list too long to name. However, Will Devonish, he's leading at the front of the field, and he's maintaining a fairly reasonable pace here, but he's being caught hand over fist by Brenton Foley. Not quite as fast as we may have thought, but Brenton Foley's got a bit more speed on there. He's rapidly capturing the closest battle on the track, so that's Turmo and Benedetti. They're going back and forth as usual, and we'll see if they have to sort of put that battle on pause to let the leaders through. So we're expecting pit stops, Steve, in the next 5 or 6 laps, like you said. Sorry, not the next 5 or 6 laps, about the next 6 or 7 laps. So potentially we could see another undercut advantage for Brenton Foley if he goes with the same strategy.
I would hazard a guess and say he probably is going to go the same strategy. He did stop, I believe, a little bit earlier, not only than JP, but he also stopped a lap earlier than Will Devonish too. So I would hazard a guess and say he is going to come in ahead of Devonish and then try and use the undercut to that advance, especially if it gets into a situation here where Will gets held up with a little bit of traffic somewhere along the line. Now, it's a bit early for them to be coming in now as they're approaching the back of the 7th place man, Aldo Benedetti. If I look a bit further afield on our track map here, the next cars that are up the road for them is 10th place man Steve Buerger, 9th place man Cam Rutledge, 14th placed man Gary Neville. And just looking to see 13th place man Ricky Slick has just come into the pits by judging by our timing monitors as well. So in the next half a dozen laps or so, these two have got to get past about another 4 or 5 cars before they take their stops. Now, Brenton Foley probably going to look to take advantage of that situation should they be approaching traffic. I dare say he'd dive in. If Will was smart, he would actually probably look at the traffic and situation on his map and go, you know what, I need to pick my opportunity to go in here and try and stay away from the traffic rather than battle my way through it. Coincidentally, in terms of battling, I think we're about to get another battle form between these two gentlemen coming up here very, very shortly. So Billy Dougal-Salonga and the man just behind him, JP Courier, has been honing in on the back of him like a Japanese missile at the moment. When you look at the times that they've been doing, Dougal-Salonga has been in the mid-12s and JP in the high 1-minute 11s. That time around a 13.1 from BDS and an 11.4 from Courier. So this gap has been shrinking very, very rapidly over the last 2 to 3 laps as JP continues his charge back up towards the top 3. In actual fact, his lap times that he's been doing even faster than the leaders.
Into the wall. So that's he's gone over the yellow line as well. So JP Courier is going to catch him as well. And he's going to be on the outside. Can he hang tough? Or it's going to be a bit disastrous.
Oh, no, there's a bit of collision.
Oh, no. That was definitely going to be an accident waiting to happen. And I guess that question mark sort of gets erased a little bit from Billy Dougal-Salonga because it's looking like a DNF. But there's still going to be a bit of a points penalty there. So he just understeered and into the fence. And
I'm just going to wind this back a little bit here because I wanted to have a look at something here, from not from so much from BDS's point of view, but also from JP Courier's point of view. Because a bit further behind, I'm just trying to pick him up. There it is there. I thought there may have been a little bit of a balk here, but there wasn't. I thought the lap traffic may have come into play. But they tried to go side by side here. Oh, that's going to be a tough one for me to call. That's going to be a tough one. I don't want to really speculate on what's just happened.
I'll be happy to speculate. I'm probably going to say BDS should have yielded there.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards that thing now. I mean, JP was entitled to a fair bit of space there, I would have thought, and the turn-in came a bit too late from BDS. So I'm a little bit worried about how that one might be perceived. I mean, he did run off the road. He was recovering. And he did leave space through turn 5, but then through turn 6, I think he might have been expecting JP just to back out of it a little bit, but he decided to hang tough, and 2 into 1 does not go.
I'd definitely hazard a guess and say that JP Courier was far enough there. So I think that after having an incident and definitely slowing, and in the face of a lap car being in front and sliding around, I think that probably should have been, let's get out of it. We'll live to fight another day. But that's how it is. So we're going to see that in the wash-up. And Billy Dougal-Salonga's gotten moving again. So thankfully not too much damage on the ZB Commodore.
Despite the fact he was on his roof, he's actually managed to get going. So hopefully, as you said, not too much damage there. But that's the second time we've seen BDS in such an incident. Remember back to Phillip Island, the final corner with his teammate. He actually went around and then was collected by his teammate, or vice versa. I can't remember who was the party that went around first in that one. I think it was BDS. So that he'll be having mad flashbacks to that right now. Now Foley looks like he's come into the pits. So if I'm going to go back here, and yes, he has. He's been into the pits, and this is very, very early. He's got 21 laps to go. He's popped into 3rd place. That moves Zach up to what is P2. On the road at the moment. He's in 2. And Devonish is in as well. So they're going to try and cover off the undercut from Brenton Foley. So let's see how that goes. Brenton Foley, that last lap round was about 40 seconds behind the leader. So he's just getting to turn number 11 now. But he's approaching under lap traffic. But those tyres are still warming up, but they will be warmer than the tyres of Zach and Will Devonish when they come out. So coming to the final corner. We're going to see if they've gotten moving again. So that looks like Devonish has gotten moving. So I reckon Brent Foley's definitely a chance to get past here. I'd say 50-50 at this stage in time. And we're going to have our questions answered. And it looks like Foley back into the lead with an excellent strategy play again, but not quite as much of a gain as it was
on JP Courier, but he's got a speed advantage as well. So let's see if Devonish can try and make up some pace on him, but I don't think he's quite got the pace at the moment.
Not at the moment. And on top of that, I think that Foley coming out behind the lap traffic as well is a little bit of a problem too. He's flashing the lights there madly. Who's that he's behind at the moment? That's the 12th place man, a crack up. They're going through the section here where we had the scene of the accident just a few moments ago, and the pass will need to be affected soon. There it is, down the inside before turn 7 and 8. Plenty of curb there as well. And now Devonish is going to be trying to put his nose right in there between these couple of corners here through turn 10. That's not too bad. He hasn't lost too much time, so great job to stick with him there. Behind him, Courier and Boak, nose to tail as well. The undercut was never going to work for Zach. Oh, roadie across the grass there between turns 11 and 12. The undercut was never going to work for Zach because he was always behind Foley before the stops. It was only going to be a matter of whether or not Foley could switch it on before Devonish could get out of the pit lane. And indeed he has. Look at the outlaps. So the outlap 15.8 for Foley, and it was a 17 dead for Devonish. So there it is yet again. Flying outlap from Brenton Foley.
Oh, Devonish has gone wide there, so the thing understeered badly in the second phase of the entry of the corner, so up into turn 3 now. So actually, it was about a second gap that Devonish had on Foley, but the 2 seconds meant that now it's a 1 second gap in Foley's favour. So that 2 seconds he's made up on the outlap. JP Courier, he's coming in for his third stop of the race, and that was, he was fourth for the time being, because he was in that sort of middle of Phil Boak, and Zach was in 5th, and we were just looking at Benedetti in 5th place, and now we're looking back at Zach. So flying the forward flag for the FGX Falcon.
It's going to be a net third as well. Phil Boak yet to stop. Zach was third when they came into the pit lane. He's been, apart from the battle that he had early on, the massive scrap between himself and Devonish and Boak, he's kept his nose very, very clean, very measured drive in only his third round of the AMS Oz Super 2, considering that this is the 8th round of the season, and this is the 12th race overall of the season. Keep in mind, when we have the sprint format, we have 2 races per round, so...
Oh, engine failure.
Oh, no!
So we're just singing Zach's praises, saying that he's the real deal, but that's engine failure, and he's parked on a very precarious part of the circuit. So that takes away a passing opportunity into turn 13.
Well, if you were a turkey, you could stick a fork in this one, because it is predominantly done. Down too many gears right before turn 13. The Ironman on the bonnet has a little heart in the middle of him that glows, and the glow in that car has just gone out.
Yeah, definitely the fire is out there. So smoking, it's definitely lost probably its oil pressure, and unfortunately he will take no further part in this race. It was actually an excellent run for Zach, and I would definitely say that he is the real deal, and we're going to see more of him in the future.
We need to stop doing, I think, what we've been doing. I think Stairs and Madbird tend to have the same issue as well sometimes when it comes to commentary. We call it the commentator's curse. We call it that for a reason. We need to stop singing people's praises, I think. That's the only way that people are not going to blow engines. So I hope we know some of these drivers tend to have the stream running at the same time that they're racing, just so they can see if we cut to them at any point in time. So I'm hoping that Zach's not one of those guys that, they're looking at me, I better put on a show, and then inevitably made a mistake. So
it gives us something to talk about, but it's not necessarily something happy to talk about. But no, we shouldn't really jump on the bandwagon and be like, hey, look at this guy, they're really good. But it's one of those type of issues.
No, you're definitely right. He's definitely someone that we're going to have to be keeping an eye on over the next couple of rounds. So we've got some good racing coming up over the next little bit as well. I believe Queensland Raceway is going to be the next one coming up after this. And that's a very, very short sprint sort of a track, and some sprint races will be going on there as well. So he's definitely got it in him, and someone we're going to keep an eye on moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, to the front of the field, this gap has pretty much remained very, very stable the last couple of laps. It's just now ticked under 1 second in favour of Brenton Foley, because Devonish was 0.2 of a second quicker that last lap around. In actual fact, there was 0.2 of a second the lap prior. It was 1/10 of a second that lap just gone. 1 lap fresher tyres for Will Devonish. don't know if that's going to make a huge difference in terms of how strong they will be toward the back end of this race. But as I step on my cord there temporarily, how it's going to go when it comes to tyre management and race management is Will just leaving a little bit on the table here. You can see he's not taking too much curb on some of the corners, trying to drive the car a little bit straighter through the braking zone rather than braking and turning at the same time. Wondering whether or not he's just trying to keep something in reserve here for a last few laps charge.
Oh, well, he sort of ruined his chances there, but he was actually catching Brenton Foley, so he sort of made up 0.2 of a second in the middle sector. But he's made it very hard for himself again. It's probably going to get back above that 1 second sort of margin between Foley and Devonish. And just coming across the line, yeah, so 1.5 seconds. So it's basically doubled. So unfortunately, when you lose time, it's very hard to get it back. And with it's only looking back about 14 or 15 laps to go. So with 15 laps to go, I don't think it's going to be... Brenton Foley is not really one to make mistakes. We did see him at turn 3, but that's very rare. So I think that's his mistake for the day, probably.
Well, when we look at the timer there, we've been racing for 58 minutes, so closing in on the hour mark. So the drivers don't tend to do a lot of these. Well, Devonish took a bit too much curb there as well. And I'm wondering whether or not he may have got a track violation for that. We'll soon find out when he gets to the second sector timing split, which has just gone through. So it looks like he managed to get away with that one for the moment. But when a race is over an hour long, 175 kilometres is the distance. These guys are not used to doing too many of those, although the back end of the season from this point on seems to be flooded with them. The endurance events, the Bathurst event's going to be a special endurance event, the Sandown event, Gold Coast event, they're all going to be feature-length races. Even the Calder Park one, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, is going to be a longer distance race. So the second half of the race littered more with long distance events than sprint events. So it'll be a bit of a change that these guys are going to get used to, and at least getting the pit stops through. And Will's just making a few too many little errors here at the moment. That gap is now blown out to 2 seconds. Not sure if he's got a control issue or something, taking a little bit more curb in some spots, just missing a few apexes in others. This last lap or two has not been ideal for him, just pushing a little bit too much on the ragged edge and losing time hand over fist to Brenton Foley at the moment.
Overdriving as we see him 2 wheels up in the air. Didn't get past that point of no return, which is good to see, otherwise he would be going out of that second position. But incidentally, Phil Boak is trying to cement that 3rd place at the moment. And JP Courier, new fastest lap of the race, so that's a 1:11.164. That's only, well, roughly 7 thousandths of a second faster than Brenton Foley's fastest lap, I should say. So JP Courier, he's had the speed, but unfortunately, chance has not really fallen his way at the moment. I think a bit of a mistake in the pit lane, and sadly, incidentally, a drive-through penalty for Brownie, so that's probably to do with pit lane.
No, he's out on the track at the moment by the looks of things. He's down in 10th place. In actual fact, he's actually just behind JP Courier on track at the moment, but about 10 seconds further adrift, even though he's a couple of laps down. So he's got himself a penalty for track limits. Yeah, JP Courier, that second pit stop so soon after the first one was a little bit concerning. I dare say maybe they either forgot to change tyres or they had a fuel issue and didn't get enough fuel into the car. I would say it's probably more the former rather than the latter. But either way, that's cost him a full transit through pit lane. He would be right up there with Foley and Devonish right now if not for that third
new
stop.
fastest lap, 1:11 dead. That's exactly 1:11 seconds, which is... He's catching Phil Boak hand over fist here, so let's see if we can get up and salvage a podium position from what could have been a potential race victory today. But the strategy play from Brenton Foley was fantastic and did get ahead of him, even if it were not for that secondary pit stop after the first one. But Brenton Foley is leading, and JP Courier finds himself trying to take the scraps off Phil Boak.
And not only that, the collision with Billy Dougal-Salonga as well would have cost him some time as well. So his race has sort of become a little bit unstuck, not only by that second pit stop, but it's sort of had a bit of a chain reaction in terms of where it's placed him and who it's placed him against. That sort of tends to be the way things go. You know, you get yourself, you make one mistake, you get caught up in somebody else's, and That's what's happened to him. He ended up with a mistake in pit lane, or his team ended up with a mistake in pit lane. He drives it and skates it in on the rear brakes there going into the final corner. Phil Boak was actually looking pretty good for a quickest lap that time around. But just fell away in that last sector. But this is going to be a tasty battle right toward the end. Only 1.1 seconds separating third and fourth place on the road. Meanwhile, a bit further back, Devonish has started to peg that gap back again a little bit. So he's got that bad mojo out of his system. And now the good mojo is flowing again. And looks like he's driving the car. So just a couple of scrappy laps. And he's back on it with we've now finished lap 51. So we've got 11 to go starting now. 11.453 that time around to Foley's 11.440, so not much in it. So the gap stays at 1.6 seconds. They're pretty much pegged each other. Then back to these two, the gap getting ever shorter. And then we get down to man in fifth place, Billy Dougal-Salonga. He's running around all on his own some at the moment, apart from the lap cars around him. The next closest battle behind is Benedetti and Termo. So these two have been going at it for a little while now, actually. They've actually moved up the order to 6th and 7th instead of 7th and 8th, where they were a bit earlier on when Brendan Ross occupied that position. Termo doing a solid job as ever for the Nissan squad. Steve Buerger now is the sole remaining FGX Falcon for Top Gear Racing not inside the top 10, but in the race as well. Cam Rutledge still inside the top 10, and now inside the top 10, and the 10th place man, Cracker, for Cracker Racing Team. First of their cars to be inside the top 10 all day. Then going back to the first of the FCR cars still in circulation, Ricky Slick and Gary Neville running, well, not so much line astern, but on track there, 11th and 12th. They got visual sight of each other. Second of the ZB Commodores for the Cracker Racing Team out of 13. And then back to Rhodey. Zach, the most recent retirement, still in 15th. Glenn Miles just ticking off the laps and got another one or two more to go until he takes the 15th place away from Zach and the remaining DNFs at the moment. Dwayne Davies for D2 Racing, the big one, Brendan Ross out of FCR Motorsport, and the second of the big ones, Mitchell Hathaway for HDS Racing. So a couple of the drivers that are up the top end in the point standings, not finishing today's race. Be interesting to see where they fall.
Oh, JP Courier, DNF. Sorry, I just spotted that out of the corner of my eye. So there's been a drama for JP Courier.
Where is he on the list? We're just looking to see if we can find him. There he is. So it's over and done with, but we sadly haven't got a replay of that. So we're not 100% sure what's gone on there, but another major player falls.
And he was catching up to Phil Boak, so we'll see if Phil Boak's got any damage on his car. That's probably a bit of a telltale. And there's something on the right front door. So yeah, Stephen, I'll get. What do you think?
Yeah, we're just going to wait for him to stop turning right. We'll be okay, I think. We might get a little bit of a cider here just as he comes through turn 11 and 12 as the car swings the other way. Yeah, there's a little bit of a dent there just in that door. I could just see it from where it was, but because this is a predominantly right-hand turning circuit and all the cameras seem to be on the wrong side, it's a bit hard to spot. But I just caught a little bit of a glimpse. Maybe there might be just a slight indentation in that door. I don't know what he's hit or if they've come together of some nature, but we're not going to speculate. We'll have to go back and have a bit of a look after the race just to see what the issue was there.
So I guess that's a get-out-jail-free card for Phil Boak because he cemented himself onto the podium.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of an indentation in that right-hand side door. But in any case, he's got margin either side. Devonish is not going to catch any time soon. BDS is falling away at a rapid rate of knots, so he's nearly 30 seconds in arrears as he tries to skate it through turn 6 there for a little bit of show. Putting on a Brenton Foley-esque show there for the moment, and a little bit of air under the left-hand side to boot.
Trying to save those left side tyres from working too hard.
Yeah, given they need a bit of a break. Oh, and a graze of the wall too down there at turn 10 as well, so
he's getting his stripes with the graze on the wall there.
Just leaving his mark, I think, or marking his territory, just like a dog likes to go along and mark its territory against a post. He's leaving his mark on the concrete walls that line this Townsville street circuit. So
You might find some blue, yellow, and red paint on there.
I think we will. If we go back after this race, we'll find it. Still setting respectable lap times in the 11s, but we've been robbed of what was going to be a relatively good finish, I would have thought, for third place if JP had been managed to continue on. Unfortunately for him, he's out of this race, promotes everybody up the order one. This gap has blown out too. It's blown out to nearly 4 seconds between Devonish and Foley. In actual fact, the last lap time around, 1.3 second differential on the last time around. That time was a 12.46 to Devonish. Just waiting for Foley's lap time to come in as well as 11.9. So this is really, well, Foley's really got his skates on now, or Will's made a few mistakes. I tend to think it's probably the latter out of this one. Again, as you said, we've seen him over driving the car a little bit, and there's a little bit, oh, there's an opportunistic pass down the inside there on Gary Neville. That is the 64 car, I believe that's Brownie that's just gone through there. We've seen
So I guess this might be a race of what might have been for Will Devonish, but he's definitely gained on his starting position. He started 6th. He's always moving forward whenever we see him. And I guess, I mean, I don't want to put the mockers on him now, but let's go for it. He might be the only one that we've said how good he is. He might actually finish this race. Touch wood.
Well, believe it or not, the top 3 are the only 3 cars that are currently on this lead lap. It's quite incredible. I mean, we expected that there would be a bit of a pace differential. We had seen that a number of the drivers who'd been able to do 11s and 12s were doing quite nicely, but then a number of them have fallen by the wayside.
This reminds me of the Sandown 500 last year, because I remember the 3 888 cars were the only 3 cars on the lead lap. So, I mean, I wasn't too impressed because I went to watch a race, not a procession of 888 cars. But here we are today, we're watching a procession of Commodores, 2 VFs and a ZB. And Brent Foley is trying to cement that lead with a 4 seconds lead at the moment. I think he's got a bit of pace up his sleeve. So he just sort of turns it on. He's sandbagging a little bit, then he turns it on again, then he sandbags a little bit, then off we go again. So Brent Foley, car 1, definitely trying to... This is helping his championship defence, but maybe time will tell if he goes up to the lead of the standings. Incidentally, Steve Buerger, another drive-through penalty issued by the stewards.
That's going to drop him behind Cam Rutledge, I think, as well. If I could turn my microphone back on, that penalty is going to drop him behind Cam Rutledge as well, Steve Buerger. So he's currently 7th place. There he is there. He's currently 37 seconds ahead of Cam Rutledge. So this will be mighty close. He might lose another spot here. He needs to get in probably and serve this penalty ASAP. Depends on the lap times that Rutledge has been doing. Burko's actually been faster than Rutledge. The last time around it was a full 1 second in terms of difference, but the lap counter as it ticks over, and yeah, in to serve the penalty straight away. It's a smart call. Where's Rutledge and all of this? In actual fact, down at turns 5 and 6, so probably a bit too far back. I think Steve Burko might be able to comfortably hold this one. So in the lane he is, 40 kilometres per hour for the number 5 FGX Falcon for Top Gear Racing. As Rutledge is coming down to turn 11 right now, we cut back to see where Steve Burko is, and yeah, I think this is going to now end up being a bit of a comfortable hold, but the margin will shrink. But Rutledge hasn't been doing the sorts of lap times that he needs to really seriously threaten Steve Burko. And back out, and Ricky Sleek with a drive-through penalty as well. And he's currently in the 10th place position and out on track, so that is going to be a track violations infringement. Seen a lot of this tonight. This is the first time in a long time we've seen quite a lot of penalties, Hans, for all sorts of things, pit lane offences and on-track offences. So about a 50-50 split between them in terms of what they've been for, but very odd to see quite a large number of them.
Yeah, definitely agree there, Steve. I think it's the nature of this street circuit. The fences are quite far away, especially on the tarmac sections where there is a yellow line. And if you go over all 4 wheels over the yellow line, you are officially considered to be not part of the racing circuit. So as long as you have 1 wheel in contact with the racing circuit inside of the yellow or the white lines, it's just, and we've seen this in real life racing, they've had to move fences closer to the edge of the track. So this is considered a track limits violation. You see roadies ended up there for the umpteenth time in turn 3. outbraked himself again. 1 million point turn, off he goes again. Aldo Benedetti, he's holding down a pretty good 5th position for the Scuderia Alitalia squad.
He's broken the back of Turmo as well, which is a battle that had been brewing on for a little while as the sun just starts to set here in Townsville as the laps wind off. And Aldo Benedetti's done a very, very nice job for the Scuderia Alitalia side, as you said. Normally, it's Brian Walsh and Mike Coulston occupying these cars. Brian Walsh away and doing other things at the moment, and a substitute driver has made it in and picked up this car and done quite a good job with it for the times that they've been racing. So if we look down here to see the results, the 5th place first race at Winton, 14th to 2nd place, and the 2nd race at Hidden Valley, the only 2 results on file for Benedetti. So looking good for a 5th place finish here as we rejoin the race leader, working the 3rd last lap of this race. So 2 more to go, an hour and 13 minutes gone, so about an hour and 15 hour and 16 minutes this race is going to go on for. And for Brenton Foley, started this race with leg cramps and muscle cramps in his braking foot, which is his left foot, and he's found a way to adapt. He's only got to hang on for 2 more laps. The gap has started to shrink again, down from what was nearly 4 seconds a little while ago to 2.3. So Devonish is trying his best to make a last charge here, but he's too far back at the moment. It was Foley grazed the wall down into turn on the kink at turn 1 and into turn 2. Just manages to hold on for the moment. A lap and 3/4 to go. He's got a little bit of margin to play with. In actual fact, he's managed to hang on to the gap between himself, just bridged it and stabilised it in sector 1. He's just got to bring it home. Started on the pole. Had a little bit of an up and down race. Did make a little mistake down at turn number 3, which gave Devonish the lead after the stops. And then, it gave Devonish the lead prior to the stops. And then some sensational outlaps on both occasions when he was trailing and went for the undercut. Gave him back the race lead. Through turn 13 and onto the main straight for the penultimate time. 1 lap to go. Devonish continues to narrow the gap. 2.1 seconds now, but it's not going to be enough. Foley down to turn 2 for the final time. This is going to make it 3 race wins in a row for Foley, and it's going to make him another race win in terms of the outright things. It'll take him his tally up to 5 for the season, including the last 3. With this victory, if he can hang on for the remainder of this half lap. He's been a class of the field tonight.
This is definitely the kind of momentum he needs after a disastrous start to the season, if I can get my words out, and this is definitely the right time to do it.
It sure is. Through turn 10, lap traffic ahead in Steve Buerger, not a problem. Only 3 corners from home. 2 right-handers and a left, and there's the second of the right-handers. Wow. 300 points awaits him at the checkered flag, and he will gladly pocket those 300 points for another race win for Brenton Foley. Will Devonish, nothing to be frowned upon. Another solid top 5 finish. This time it's a podium for Will. So a great run for him, having led the race for a little bit as well. Our 3rd place man is still some while off. That's Phil Boak. So he's going to come home and make it a 1 and 3 on the podium for PBF Race Engineering. The only 3 cars to finish on the lead lap. So just rounds up Glenn Miles through turn 12 and down into 13 for what is the final time for him. So a 3rd place finish for Phil Boak. He gets a little bit squirrely and aggressive on the loud pedal there. And a good 3rd place finish. Billy Dougal Salonga with a 4th place finish, but again, we know that there is a question mark hanging over that on more than one occasion. Aldo Benedetti celebrates with doing some donuts down at turn number 2, so very, very happy with his 5th place finish there. Turmo ended up 6th after all that, so that's a really good, strong result for the Nissan driver, and goes along with some of the good results he's had over the course of the season so far, as a roadie getting involved there. So Steve Buerger, actually, despite being a couple laps down and a couple of mistakes, ended up in P7, so that's still 2 positions further up from where he started this race. Cam Rutledge inside the top 10 for CRE Motorsport for another time, so he's actually had a good string of top 10 finish this season. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's his 5th out of the 12 races contested so far. Cracker, the first of the Cracker Racing Team cars, home in 9th place, rounding out the top 10. The second of the Cracker cars in the hands of Brownie. So good solid result for those drivers over the course of 62 laps. And we have had a pretty good race for a return to feature race running here, Hans, and we're just waiting on a handful of the drivers to make their way in to join us, and I'm going to turn you loose. I'm going to let you have Brenton Foley in just a few moments. And in actual fact, he's here now, so you have at it. You can go and have a chat with our race winner, mate.
Thanks, Steve. I'm down here in the commentary box with the podium place getters, and I'll have a chat to Brenton Foley, our race winner tonight. 3 on the trot, mate. Well done.
Thanks very much. Will definitely kept me honest throughout that whole last stint. I've never wanted a race to finish so quickly. I'm absolutely spent. That was a great race, though. Quite a few people had a lot of pace, and all about track position, this track. I had a quick car, but not a passing car, so went for the undercut both times, and it luckily paid off.
Yeah, it was a very supreme strategy maneuver there, and it was pretty good with the outlap and the inlap. They were a lot quicker as well. So, Brendan, just wanted to ask, with the passing, what was necessarily the thing that was really struggling with the passing?
I felt like both PBF cars tonight felt like we were not the strongest under brakes. We had good turn and good kind of balance and longevity of the stint and the tyre life, but under brakes, I wouldn't really feel that confident passing coming into a corner. So something to work on, but overall, I'm really happy with the result.
Well done, Brenton. Good to see you making a bit of a charge in the middle section of the season, mate.
Thanks very much. And I'll just quickly say that this series has got a lot of experienced and a lot of beginner drivers. And at a track like tonight, we had a lot of finishes. So everyone did a really good job. And we're really good at positioning the car for when we were passing them and lapping them. So everyone did fantastic tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree. From the commentary box, the driving standards were very good. And Brendan Foley, our race winner tonight, congratulations. And Will Devonish, we always see that you are a bit of a Mr. Consistency, and you also managed to get 4 places up from your starting position. How'd you go?
Yeah, same as Foley. I'm absolutely knackered. It was
1 hour 16 minutes later.
Yeah, it was probably the longest race I've had for a good 3 or 4 months. So I'm absolutely knackered. My knee is killing me. My braking leg. I actually realised in that final sector I kept going wide at all these corners, and thought it was the car. It was actually my leg was fatigued. I just couldn't pull the car up.
Yeah, those are the things that sort of creep in these longer races. But we saw the gap sort of seesaw a little bit there. Would you perhaps struggle with consistency due to your issues?
Yeah, so I think the first half of that last stint, I was really struggling to get the car pulled up in the long straights. But then when I realised and sort of focused a bit, the car came back to me, and I think I could have had a real hot crack at Foley, but Billy unfortunately got in the way. I think my car was better. I kept my rears a lot better than Foley towards the end of the stint, but just couldn't pull it off.
Thanks, Will, for your time, and congratulations on a good second place. He's definitely cementing his place in the top 3 of the championship standings, Steve. And we'll move on to Phil Boak now, 3rd place. I guess it's salvaging somewhat set some points after not an ideal night. Hey, Phil?
Yeah, exactly. I definitely got a little bit lucky with I know what happened with JP. He had an extra pit stop, and Zach dropped out as well. So I got a little bit lucky there. But yeah, I got that drive through, and I really thought, no, here we go, this is game over, and I finished, back in the top 10. But no, managed to come back.
We saw that the pace perhaps wasn't quite as good from you as we would have normally expected. Was that particularly an issue as well? Same sort of braking issues that Brenton had?
Nah, in the first stint, I locked the tire quite badly, and I had a flat spot, and then I knocked a wall, and I had a tiny bit of damage, and the car was just horrid. I couldn't drive it, so it was just getting to the pit stop, which was very unplanned. I went into the final corner, locked the rears, and slid into the pit lane. That's why I got a drive through, because I was speeding. But yeah, otherwise the middle like part was okay, and the final set. The car was good. I was keeping the gap to the leaders. It wasn't changing. At points I was catching. So no, car come back. It wasn't bad.
Well done, Phil, on a solid third place, and well done to our podium place getters. Race winner, Brendan Foley. Second place, Will Devenish, moving up from sixth place, and Phil Boak, he salvages a third place position. Incidentally, Steve, we had Mitch Hathaway. He's had some dramas with his ping on Telstra, and he's Adelaide based. So the problem with that is that he couldn't make it out tonight into the race. He didn't get to the first sector, and that's it from down here in the commentary box, Steve.
Yeah, sure is. We did have a couple of issues last night in the ARW race with Greg Tara. He's actually based out of the Adelaide Hills, and some of the wild and woolly weather going on at the moment is playing a bit of havoc with some of the Telstra signals up in his area. He's actually on 4G, and his ping last night was absolutely woeful, and a similar fate for Mitch Hathaway in the Adelaide area tonight as well. So for Brenton Foley, 3 wins on the trot though, so he's racking them up. He's got 5 in total, and the points gap at the front is narrowed. So top 3 as they stand at the moment, Boak, Foley and Devenish. So that has not changed. The big issues tonight though, Cam Rutledge moving ahead of Brendan Ross by virtue of the Brendan Ross DNF. Mitchell Hathaway, despite the DNF, has not surrendered 4th place. He's just lost a fairly huge whack of points to Will Devenish. In actual fact, he's 303 behind 3rd place at the moment. So a feature race win and some behind Will Devenish, having started that season with a bang with that wonderful win in Adelaide. Brendan Ross, his DNF has dropped him down to 6th. That battle for 5th and 6th between Rutledge and Ross is still very, very tight. In actual fact, you look at Termo and Steve Buerger and even Ricky Slick, they're buying into that battle as well. You've got a number of drivers there that are covered by, about 60 points. There's 5 drivers there covered by 60 points, and we're past the halfway point in the season now. So definitely these little battle packs are starting to form, and the balance of your top 10 is rounded out by Billy Dougal-Salonga. So he currently occupies P10 now. JP Courier, Dwayne Davies, the last 2 in the top 12. DNF for both those guys tonight. Very, very costly. The only major incident that we know we've got to take a look at, or probably I would imagine will be reported, is the Brendan Ross and Billy Dougal-Salonga incident. But we're going to let that sit for the moment, because our next broadcast for you, if we take a look at our race calendar, is, as we said, Queensland Raceway. Got a little bit of time, couple of weeks away, in actual fact, return to sprint race format. And then I think one that everybody's going to be looking forward to, Calder Park Raceway. Puts a smile on our faces, and I'm not sure what version of the track we're using yet, whether we're just using the layout or we're using the combined layout, but I think we'll let the admins sort that one out. But that's certainly going to be one that we're all going to look forward to, and then have a look at the back end of the race. The last 5 rounds, feature, endurance, feature, feature and feature. We did say the back half of this season predominantly features the feature length races, the big long races, and the endurance one as well, and it's going to be a very, very trying and testing time for these drivers. They're not going to get any respite from September onwards.
It's the season of endurance, Stephen. And what else can we say apart from that? You've just got to manage to get to the finish. To finish first you must finish. They always say, the old Tide saying. But yeah, looking forward to Queensland Raceway and a return to sprint racing format, like you said. So a 2 race in August, Queensland Raceway, Quarter Park Raceway, sprint races, 4 races there. We should see how good the sprint drivers are. No issue with pit stops, no issue with fuel. Just off we go for a good old fashioned race. So I'm keen to see how that turns out, and also keen to see how Quarter Park goes as well.
Well, we'll return in a couple of weeks to see what happens at Queensland Raceway. Until then, this has been round 8, the AMS Oz Super 2 series for 2019. Can anybody stop the PBF pair at the top of the standings? I've been Steve DeVries on Nether, been accompanied by Hans Brunswick. Until next time, please drive safely. Bye for now.